All right, friends, welcome into the live Salt City Hoops postcast. I said that a little backwards, the Salt City Hoops live postcast. So, very happy to have you here today. Let's chat about this great win over the Washington Wizards today. I believe I got the score correct for once. No, I didn't. Absolutely did not. So, we're going to change that real quick while y'all roll in. Talk about this one. The folks on the spaces don't know what the score is because they're not here, but that's okay. They're not on video checking out what the score is. But let me make sure I at least get the correct score today. That's like I do all the stats. I get the logos right. I change the beer that I'm drinking accurately, and I forget to change the score on here. So I got to go to my template, change that up, and get the. And get the score right. Part of the reason I forget is like if the Jazz lose twice in a row, or if the Jazz win twice in a row, or multiple times in a row, I kind of look to see if like the score is like the right team is winning. And now we've got it changed, so that should be the correct score for y'all. Love having you all in here today. I'm Mark. Welcome to the Salt City Hoops live postcast and beer. I love being here, especially after a win. This is the last game for the Jazz before Christmas, and I don't know how to include Christmas before and including Christmas. The Jazz, who were expected to win something around 24, 25 games this year, were not slated to be on a Christmas Day broadcast this year. Of course, the Jazz are now 2 or 3 or 4 games away from the Las Vegas over-under, and they're slated to win something like 42, 43 games, but we all get a Christmas break. Even when the Jazz were good, they didn't like putting the Jazz on Christmas Day broadcasts. I'm sure back in the David Stern era, there was an agreement between Larry Miller, the owner, and David Stern not to schedule as few Sunday home games as possible in the obviously LDS dominated space in Utah. But post David Stern and certainly post Miller, I don't think there's that big of a old school concern. But the Jazz won't be playing on Christmas. I say this all to say I'm decked out, having fun today. We're having a beer. I'm finishing up this little American Red Ale here, which is from Baltimore. Well, that showed up on screen well enough. But and after that, we're going to be diving into the beer that you see on screen today, which is my Chocolate Churro Imperial Stout. Can't wait to crack that open with you all. Got myself a fancy glass, and we can get into talking about the game, I guess, right? We got some basketball to talk about. Pulling up my stats here. So the Wizards were up in the first half, and it really felt like, while it was a back and forth game, it did feel like the Wizards were definitely in control of a lot of things, such as Bradley Beal was able to pretty much get whatever matchup he wanted. Lauri Markkanen was in foul trouble in the first half, and Bradley Beal was able to steal that third foul off of Markkanen with about 2 minutes left to play. And Will Hardy was a little bit too cautious with Lauri Markkanen on his foul trouble, I thought. But the Wizards really just had this nice little offensive rhythm going. The Jazz offense was okay in the first half, but they just don't provide enough defensive pressure or against star players. And Bradley Beal had a nice little first half there for him. If I look at this here, he's... and if I select just Bradley Beal here, yeah, we had... Bradley Beal was 8 for 11 in the first half. All 2-point shots, no 3-pointers. I'm sure that was a strategy by Utah to kind of force him off the 3-point line, but he really had his way in the paint, and he's got this nice little mid-range game that Utah, going back to Quinn Snyder, right? And it is like a modern coaching thing, like give him the mid-range. But when you have players so good at just having a nice little shooting stroke, if you're going to give him wide open 2-point shots, they're going to go in. So he was 8 for 11 in the first half, drew a couple fouls, and the fast break defense, transition defense, remained a complete nightmare for Utah in the first half. And we can beat a broken drum or whatever combination of bad idioms you want. But Rudy Gay was targeted for 13 straight points by the Wizards. It wasn't just Bradley Beal. It was all sorts of players for the Wizards, especially in transition, right? And it's not just like, okay, you get a 2-on-2 transition and Washington gets a bucket. It's more like you get in like this fast break situation where you just got to try to find your man and mark him, and say, and if you end up in a mismatch because of the marking and transition, that's fine, but just like kind of get to your man. There was a lot of times when Rudy Gay would see somebody like Corey Kispert, who is not someone he was guarding most of the night, like run right by him, and Rudy Gay would think, well, that's not my problem, right? And you see Rudy Gay arguing with a lot of teammates about like, well, that's just not my fucking responsibility, right? And instead of providing that extra help or extra awareness of like, okay, where are my teammates? Where am I most useful? He's letting this guy just kind of blow right by him for layups. And there was one point where Corey Kispert all he had to do was just run to the corner and shoot an easy 3-pointer in transition. So like I said, 13 straight points against Rudy Gay that were directly his fault. I thought the worst one of those was he was matched up against Kyle Kuzma on the right wing. Kuzma, easy dribble right, gets in the paint, and Walker Kessler provides help at just the right time. Walker Kessler, as the center, did not commit too early to it, and Walker Kessler stepped up and made a contest on the ball, and Kuzma made a deft but difficult pass to Daniel Gafford, and Rudy Gay was right there and just did not do anything to impede the pass, did not do anything to impede Daniel Gafford from getting the easiest 2 points of his life. So a little bit of a disappointment there from my perspective when it comes to Rudy Gay, over and beyond the things that we've complained about. And I still struggle to see where even a guy like, it's a different position, but Talen Horton-Tucker couldn't be like just a little bit better in the roles he was. Like Rudy Gay, only 1 point was Rudy Gay playing with a guy like Jared Vanderbilt, where Rudy Gay was ostensibly the center or the power forward playing alongside someone who isn't a big man. Like if Rudy Gay is playing alongside Lauri Markkanen, I consider Lauri Markkanen to be a center-capable entity, right? Especially if the Wizards are going to roll out Rui Hachimura or something like that, or even like Anthony Gill, like pretty much anyone other than Daniel Gafford in this situation, right? Porzingis was out today. Like Taj Gibson is Taj Gibson. We know he's an ancient entity at this point, and so I'm comfortable saying like Markkanen can play with Taj Gibson as the centers on the court. So Rudy Gay, sure, if he's playing with Jared Vanderbilt, I understand like the usefulness of his size, but aside from that, it's like I'm just not seeing. The shooting is miserable. His shot selection is miserable. Pretty much the only time he shoots it that I feel okay about is he just gets the ball on the elbow and nobody's guarding him, and he just shoots a practice mid-range jumper. He's got absolutely zero juice getting to the rim. He missed a wide-open layup today at the paint. So, look, as with the Talen Horton-Tucker hate early in the season, like there's only so much you can do to shit on a guy before it becomes rote. But when the performance is especially bad, and that was Rudy Gay defensively in the first half and offensively, but whatever. It's the defense that I'm looking at the coaching staff being like, is there really not a better option defensively if the offense is going to be what it is? Defense, are we really relying on that? Is it the rebounding? Is that really the issue? So I wasn't sure about that. I got to finish up this red ale so I can crack on one of this Imperial Stout. Jazz get the win by a good second half, which I can't wait to talk about. Yeah, this red ale for Big Turpin in the chat. This is from Dewclaw Brewing Company. I was in my craft beer store the other day, and I think red ales are a nice little game drinking beer, right? This clocks in at just a mere 5% for me. So let's talk about some other thing. Gotta find my bottle opener, open up this Imperial Stout here. For those in the Twitter spaces, I'm sorry you can't see this beauty, but this is an absolute banger. I've heard this is absolutely delicious. A friend of mine sending this to me from Massachusetts. Pour this one out, and we'll think about the other guys to talk about today. What was funny is when I was setting up the backdrop today, I usually just pick out the top 3 scorers and go from there, but like I really couldn't choose between the 4 players that or the 3 players that I'm usually able to highlight. So I had to add a fourth. I never add a fourth line onto the broadcast, but I had to today because Markkanen, I always have to include. What has Markkanen done today? If we're going to do this all-star push of how good of a player he's been, well, I got to do his 22 points. Clarkson, that's everyone's favorite player. That's our best scorer, maybe second best scorer to Markkanen. But everyone wants to know what Clarkson's doing. He's got 23 points. And then I picked, the third high scorer. In this case, the team's top scorer today was Malik Beasley, and that's not a huge surprise given Malik Beasley can put up points in a hurry. But Beasley with 25 points, he only shot 3 of 7 from 3 today. I say only 3 of 7 as a percentage, but usually he's jacking up 10, 11, 12 3-point shots. And today he's shooting only 7 threes. And today and the last game, which I should look up, which would make for great radio as I look it up live, is his 2-point shooting and his attacking the rim is having a lot more verve these days. He's got he doesn't have good dribble moves, shake, or speed, but he has good confidence, and he doesn't really turn it over very much. Like for a guy with limited passing vision, for a guy who doesn't exactly have the speed or the shake, he's had a lot of confidence the past 2 games getting to the rim, and he's always shooting a lot of these shots contested. And so it leaves you a little bit hesitant as to like, okay, is this a thing for Beasley? Is he just having a couple nice games? But the fact that he's even attempting it at all, right? So he shoots these contested 2s or contested shots at the rim, and they just feel in control, though. A lot of times when we're watching Jordan Clarkson, his contested 2s seem in control, right? Like he just has this way of controlling a lot of his shot attempts regardless of the pressure that's on him. And Beasley doesn't have the length, but he does have good bulk for his size, 6'3", 6'4" player. And he's not short armed by any means. And he's crafty in the layup area. I thought he was actually quite impressive from 2. He's drawing fouls. He 4 or 5 from the free throw line today. His 4 steals were really impressive defensively. Not normally a high steal player, but what's notable is that he's a guy on the fast break that isn't slowing it down, right? I was mentioning it the other night that I was kind of disappointed in the fast break performance of the Jazz. When they do get these transition opportunities, it doesn't seem like they have, fuck you, ram it down your throat kind of players that other teams seem to always have against the Jazz, right? And today we saw Beasley being one of those guys, and he was firing the ball down the court after getting a steal or a rebound, and he brought his way to a bunch of great 2-point shots, and so I was wildly impressed with his 25 points. 9 of 17 from the field, so that clocks in at 6 of 10 from 2. So I just really like Malik Beasley's thing today. So aside from those 3 guys, you got to talk about Walker Kessler, who plays the most minutes of any game in his NBA career. He gets the start today, 32 minutes to Jared Vanderbilt's 28. So we saw a lot of Walker Kessler and Jared Vanderbilt together. I don't think it hurt the spacing of the team very much at all, because I do think the ball handlers were finding a great way to move the ball around a little bit more. I think Kessler and Vanderbilt were way more staggered in the second half, which helped juice the offense a little bit more. So it's not exactly like, oh, I'm happy to have Vanderbilt and Kessler out there together. Kessler plus 16, Vanderbilt a -7 today, by the way. But Kessler, his second half was great. His first half, he's getting attacked. First time you drive on him in the game, he's committing a pretty much a silly big man foul for someone of his athleticism, where he's actually going up, straight up, it's a good contest, and then right at the last second, as the offensive player makes contact with his body, he's drooping his arms down. And that's all core muscle, right? We think about, like, how is Rudy so good at just staying vertical and blocking shots? A lot of it comes with that core strength of, like, once the offensive player makes contact with your body in the air, do you have the upper body and core strength to keep vertical? And it was he drops his arms down and caught Kuzma in the face and the elbow. Slight call, but that's the number one thing the refs are looking for, right? Like sometimes they miss if you only get one arm up and they miss the off elbow, that's one thing. But if you got both arms up and you're swiping them down, that's an easy call to make. So that was hard. Otherwise, just a nice game from him. And this is gonna sound so fucking stupid, guys. Walker Kessler's screens are dramatically improved from just 5 days ago. And I don't know if it's coming home, getting some break, but his screens are large, they are static, they're quick, which is any big guy can set a slow screen that is not a foul. The difference maker of screens in this league is how quickly can you set those screens? How quickly can you reverse those screens? How quickly can you bait your defender or the guy guarding the ball handler in a different direction? And today he was doing all sorts of advanced screening techniques, which, like I said, is really fucking annoying to hear, I'm sure. But it was really impressive to watch him flipping screens, not committing fouls. And it wasn't like, oh, he was setting screens and the man defending the ball handler was tripping, or I'm speaking too much to say they weren't incorrectly uncalled either. Like, it wasn't like the refs were letting him set bullshit screens and getting away with it. He was letting guys get really open to the rim. And if you're going to be playing with another non-shooter like Jared Vanderbilt, you need to allow your ball handler to just have space to work, right? And if you can completely magnetize the player guarding the ball handler and you send your point guard or the other ball handler off to the races, just off to make decisions on his own with a big man guarding him, frankly, go ahead and send that help from Jared Vanderbilt in the corner. I guarantee you someone like Mike Conley or Jordan Clarkson or Malik Beasley a couple times, and especially Colin Sexton, they're going to find a way to score or make a pass there. So, wildly impressed by Walker Kessler's screening game today. I thought his defense was nice, had a couple great blocks, one fabulous block at the end. He got caught a couple times. There was one where Daniel Gafford had the ball and on the left block of the free throw line off of a pass from, I think it was Jordan Goodwin or Monte Morris. And Walker Kessler's in position. He's a foot in front of the rim, and Daniel Gafford is a great athlete, to be fair. But Daniel Gafford rises up, and he slams it right over Walker Kessler with nary a contest. And I thought that was pretty disappointing, but Kessler had played a bunch of minutes at that point. It's very possible the dude was just fucking tired. So, the second half just had a lot of great, impressive performances. We got to give two main second half shout outs, mainly to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I have completely shit on Alexander-Walker over the past few games because I thought everyone keeps talking about his defense, even though he's fouling a lot and really wasn't providing that much resistance on guys like Jaden Ivey or Drew Holiday a couple games ago. It really wasn't all that impressive defensively. And today I do think he brought it defensively. I thought he provided a little bit more verve on Beal for a minute, but he was also guarding guys like Monte Morris. He was guarding guys like Corey Kispert and providing Jordan Goodwin. He had a great defense on Jordan Goodwin at portions of this game, and no long twos from Naw, just kind of playing within himself. He had to playing alongside Conley and Clarkson at one point, or Conley and Sexton, I think it was. Just those three guard lineups were really nice today because all the guards played within themselves. Pleasantly surprised by Nickeil Alexander-Walker's defense today, and he had 3 of 6, 8 points, team leading to plus 24 today. With 4 assists, just 2 turnovers from him in 21 minutes, which I thought was completely fine. I was expecting that with Colin Sexton back in today, we wouldn't see any Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But you're able to have Mike Conley play just 27 minutes, which is good for him. I'm so sick of overtaxing Conley because I think it's hurting his overall game. Conley 3 of 7, 0 of 2 from 3 today. Missed a couple floaters that were wide open. 6 assists, 1 turnover for Conley. But Sexton said after the game he was on a minutes limit, and Sexton was fabulous today. That's my word of the day, clearly. Before I talk about Colin Sexton, we're going to try this little Imperial Stout here from our friends back east. This is a churro stout, barrel aged with cacao, chocolate, cinnamon, and vanilla. The vanilla, they make sure to tell you that it's from Vanuatu. So, cheers to you all. Merry Christmas. Oh, that's a fun one. Let's talk about Colin Sexton. Ooh, that's yummy. Sexton with 4 fouls today. Again, we all watch these guys with real active defense and we call them good defenders. Guys, this ain't fucking college basketball. Active defense does not always mean good defense. In fact, in the NBA, if it looks like a guy is trying too hard, probably compensating for something, and that's that they're actually a bad defender. And 4 fouls for Sexton in 17 minutes calls to that. And Sexton, look, he's enough of a veteran to say, like, oh, he's back from injury from a sore hamstring. He's just getting used to the NBA speed again. I'm sorry, a guy who plays like Sexton, I don't think we can actually give him a pass there. But his offense was pristine. He was doing exactly the type of things that we're hoping that efficient offense does. And that is attacking the rim or shooting threes, or if you're going to shoot a mid-range, make it a part of your game that is wide open, or making good passing decisions. And Colin Sexton did not need to pass today. He had 0 assists in 17 minutes, but I didn't think he made a single bad decision on the court today. I'm sure if I rewatch the entire 48 minutes, I can call out a mistake that Sexton made today offensively. But otherwise, I frankly don't remember his one turnover. All of his scoring shooting possessions, I thought, were correct decisions. He ends up 6 of 7 from the field, 4 of 4 from the free throw line, completely obliterated the Wizards at the rim with his lightning fast speed, and he reminds me of an actually good Dante Exum with his speed. He actually has a handle. He actually understands how to get leverage on a big man when he's behind you, or if he's at the rim. No matter what, he understands leverage and know where to place the ball on the backboard to get those 2 points, right? Dante Exum had the world's fastest first step and couldn't do anything once he got to the free throw line, right? He would just keep going forward and then fall over. And Sexton draws fouls. He gets like at the rim and understands where to put the ball to at least get hacked and try to get a foul. And not Bojan Bogdanovic style. Bogdanovic was good at barely getting touched and falling over, right? And then screaming for a foul. Colin Sexton draws contact. It's when Sexton does a little bit of like when the defense really collapses on him and sends 2-3 defenders his way and they're daring him to pass, that he can make bad decisions. But the Wizards didn't do that today, right? And so maybe the Wizards defense made him look a little good because it didn't force him to make tough decisions. But all right, fine. If you're going to, as a team concept, right? That's what Sexton's good at, and that's how we get the win. So it's kind of hard to think of these things in this context when you're rooting for these players to learn new skills. Who are you going to be part of the future Jazz? And so you can analyze, okay, how did he score here? Was it efficient? Was that a good decision? He missed the basket, but it was a good decision. He made the basket, but it was a bad decision. At the end sometimes it's just fun to look at these games as basketball games, and the Wizards did nothing to prevent the things that Sexton is good at. 2 of 2 from 3 today. Both his decisions were great. His second 3 was a end of the half or end of the quarter 3-point shot that just absolutely nailed it to cap off of a great scoring spree in the first quarter. Love Sexton today. So I'm going to take a couple sips of beer here. I haven't talked about everybody. We got a bunch of people here today. 13.1% chocolate churro imperial stout. I'm going to talk about some more guys soon, but I tell you, someone who's going to probably bring some of these people I haven't brought up yet is going to be a friend of the program, Andrew Streeter, who I want to bring on Twitter Spaces, who you on YouTube are going to hear from Twitter. And come on in, Andrew, and tell me what you said. It's been a couple days, brother. What's going on? What'd you see today?
Man, Merry Christmas. Dude, it dropped like 40 degrees today where I live in South Texas. I'm in San Antonio. It's 6-degree wind chill. If you aren't familiar with the weather here, we are not used to that. There's no winter coats in Texas. We just wear hoodies and have a little prayer in our hearts. So it's cold, man. It's really cold.
Is everyone safe? You got your power on and everything?
Yeah, power's not going to be I don't think power is going to be the problem this time because there's no real precipitation. But yeah, it's just making sure the faucets are dripping because you don't want to have any frozen pipes. But man, the wind is howling out there.
Yeah, here in Colorado, I actually stood outside for a minute just to see all right, what actually happened, and it was really wild to have that cold weather come in and drop down, and we hit minus 15 at one point. We're still dealing with it. So happy to be inside watching the Jazz though.
Oh yeah, man. Okay, So, who's getting Rudy Gay's minutes? Is it Fontecchio? I'm all about it. Let's get Fontecchio all of Rudy Gay's minutes. I don't care. Agbaji. Let's play Agbaji.
So I mean the number.
I am fully out on Rudy Gay.
Yeah, I mean we've always have been. I think my issue with Rudy Gay's minutes isn't that he is getting minutes. It's that how many minutes he's getting. And I understand that Hardy has like this, 8 to 9 man rotation. There was that one game, remember, against the Clippers that he played ostensibly a 7-man rotation at one point, and Rudy Gay was actually out of the lineup that game. And look, it's pretty simple that there's no trust in Agbaji and Fontecchio. And Agbaji I understand, Fontecchio I kind of understand, but I feel a little skeptical about. And Horton Tucker has lost all of the confidence he had from the offseason. So, I talked a lot about Rudy Gay and the problems there, and the only reason I interrupted you is because, like, I'm kind of sick of talking about him, and I'm like, I feel like we can do a lot better than talk about Rudy Gay.
That's fair enough, and I wonder how much of it is that he's Hardy. He and Hardy are boys from their San Antonio days, And
every reporter says that, and like it's clear that they did have a relationship. And as Hardy's installing his offense and installing his defensive principles, there is something to that. For the first 2 weeks of the season, we're well past that at this point.
Yeah, you'd like to think so. And honestly, like, I don't know. I'm pretty overall generally thrilled with Will Hardy so far this season. I mean, we were talking early on, man, like when they were going on their big early run. If you looked at this, is such a brutally front-loaded schedule for the Jazz, and I was like, okay, we make it to Christmas, which we're basically here, and we're 500. We're 3 games above 500. I mean, I feel like they could do pretty well down the stretch.
Yeah. The schedule gets a lot better. And the tanking teams will tank harder, and we expect it to be one of those teams for sure. But here we are with a great team with good players and players who are on an upward trajectory. I think we can say that Kessler and Markkanen and Beasley are on clear upward trajectories. I think we haven't seen enough out of Colin Sexton. I think we haven't seen enough out of Jared Vanderbilt. And Jordan Clarkson is pretty much net neutral, and I think Mike Conley is cratering down to almost negative trade value. He's not negative trade value, but Conley's got a large contract next year. It's half guaranteed, but the guarantee is a lot as well, and so it's hard to look at Conley's downfall and think much of theirs. So I do wonder with the Jazz trajectory, like, with the players who are playing better and better and the players who are kind of staying the same, is this a team that can rattle off a 6-game win streak, or is this a team that's going to sit around 500 the rest of the season?
It's a good question. I just, I'm thoroughly enjoying the ride. And I got to say, I'm enjoying this season so much more than the previous 2. I never thought I would say that in like a billion years. But just, I don't know. It just feels like, I don't know if it's just because all the pressure's off, and it's fun to see guys give a shit every night.
Yeah, and let me
do.
And just because you weren't on the past couple nights, I'm gonna poke you with a hot button question. And because we've had a lot of conversation, Streeter, over the past couple weeks about how fun this team is and how much of a chore it was to watch the team the past couple years. And I've argued that part of that is expectations, and fighting for the expectations and falling short is more stressful and harder to deal with innately. But we all know that it's more than that. We all know that it was way harder to deal with this team from a personality perspective, the things that were going on off the court. And so with the Donovan Mitchell comments this week, I'd love to hear your thoughts on just are we being unfair to Donovan, or should we appreciate Donovan more? I'm curious where Andrew Streeter lies on the Donovan Mitchell hate versus love perspective. I'm unabashedly pro Donovan Mitchell, and if I was in Utah, I would absolutely cheer his return. I think there are a lot of people who would boo his return, which I think is insane. I think where I come on the nuance side of this, though, is I think Donovan Mitchell is more of a source of a lightning rod for the issues, personality-wise, the Jazz faced. And so I think there's that small element to it that I think a lot of people are missing as far as like this blunt yes or no side of things. But that aside, let's say you're in Utah when Donovan Mitchell comes back. What's feeling in your heart as you see him announced for the visiting team?
I'm immensely grateful for the time that we had Donovan Mitchell, the time that we got to watch him grow into what he's become. And thankful for the time, for all of the crazy thrills that he provided as the face of the franchise. And he had to carry a lot of weight as a rookie early on and grow up really fast. And I'm super. And after that summer, the summer that Hayward left, as low as everybody felt then, to be able to to win a series against OKC that next year with a rookie, and just really see them become into their own. Like, that's going to be high on my list of things that I cherish as a Jazz fan for a really long time.
Yeah, as I mentioned on
and I feel like a lot of people, as far as the issues go, and they look at the interview with Don and the things that he said, one, they're not reading the whole thing, or they're not listening to the whole thing. They're picking out the parts that they want to be offended by, and two, they're telling on themselves. Like,
yeah, I agree. For sure, I think like we've all heard Don speak, right? Like when you read that interview, like you have to read like the entire paragraph, and like I was hearing Donovan's voice throughout that whole thing of like this respectful young kid who is just acknowledging. I hate to use this word because it's not the same as like anything else, but I felt like someone who was just like acknowledging the trauma in the room, right? And no, it wasn't capital T trauma or anything like that, but it was somebody who was saying like, look, that shit sucked, but we had some great times. I clearly grew as a player. I'm happy to be on this team with fucking Evan Mobley and Darius Garland and a player's coach like JB Bickerstaff, who probably isn't as like coke-headed fanatical as Quinn Snyder for both good and bad, frankly, in Bickerstaff's case. But you brought up something regarding his rookie season that I mentioned in a summer podcast right after the trade with Dan Clayton for our Salt City Hoops podcast about like what do you remember about Donovan Mitchell? And I think all of these people who are complaining so hard about Don's presence, whatever his interview. And they're starting to have these sour tastes in their mouth, or they're thinking about booing Donovan Mitchell. The only reason I'm kind of bringing it up is not only because you were I haven't talked to you for a couple days, but also because in the apparently according to the beat reporters in the arena today on the Kicks cam, they showed some like Don issue 4s or something, his latest issue, and the crowd booed. And I'm like, is this crowd really gonna fucking boo Don? And
it's absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to I'm beating around the bush to what I want to say, which is his rookie season after Gordon Hayward left. It's up there for like top 3 euphoric sports experiences for me. Is like the whiplash from losing Hayward, who we thought was on this like, he just made an All-Star game. We really thought there was like a super, super high upward trajectory for a Gordon Hayward type to play into his like mid-30s as if not a first banana, then a max contract second banana, like a Chris Middleton type. And we're like, all right, we just got to build around Gordon Hayward. And like he was that good, losing Hayward for nothing, got to replace the salary slot. We're filling out the team with fucking Thabo Cephalosha and Epe Udo. Like Epe Udo was like the star signing of the offseason. And fucking Donovan Mitchell brings us all back from the dead in 2 weeks. I haven't felt a more euphoric moment than when he scored the 38 points or whatever it is against the Pelicans, right? And he got that and one foul where he's sitting on the ground and Derek Favors is picking him up. Like that's what I remember about the Donovan Mitchell experience. And if you remember just the Dallas series, or if you're just remembering the Denver struggles after he has his 50-point games, it's like you said, I think it's saying more about you than him. I invoked the Dan Clayton podcast in part because he has requested to speak, and I want to bring him on to talk about today, talk about anything NBA, talk about Christmas. Dan Clayton, you're always in. I'm glad the esteemed Dan Clayton is here to talk to me about Jazz basketball. So what you got?
Am I on, fellas?
You're on, brother.
So, first of all, I don't even know what I can add to this that you guys haven't already said. You're right. You're absolutely right. That, like, look, the basketball side of, like, how and I'm using basketball pretty broadly here because I mean both on the court stuff and, like, everything else surrounding Donovan and the way that team.
Like there's two different off the court things, right? We say off the court a little broadly sometimes. There's off the court within the team and off the court when it comes to social justice issues or showing up in people's barbecues, right? Like there's two different off the courts here.
Right. So like, talking about the role that Don played in, the way that iteration of the team ended, I think is fair, and I think that there's some nuance there, and I can say that still appreciating all the joy you're talking about. By the way, you shorted him. I'm pretty sure that New Orleans game was 41 points, but that's just me being a jerk.
Thank you.
So I don't get how anyone, even knowing all of the stuff that happened toward the end of that generation of the Jazz, I don't know how someone can just sort of piss away the 5 years of just unadulterated joy that player brought us as a fan base, and the legitimacy that he gave at a time when it was far from guaranteed. I think it's amazing. I think it would be ludicrous to stand there and boo someone that did that energized the franchise in that way. And then I think that's a totally separate conversation from, here's someone who has some things he wants Utahns to consider about the experience that people have in their state. And he's not the first person to say it, and he's not the last. So I think people that are willing to use the on-the-court stuff, and again, I on the court, like the basketball stuff, the team stuff, like as their excuse to not listen to what I think are very valid, if they're valid things, if for no other reason than that they're that man's experience, right? And to, telling him that that's not valid because we don't like how a playoff series ended is like worse than gaslighting. It's bonkers that we have to have that conversation with people. And I know that we don't want to wind up on like an hour-long social justice tangent on a post-game.
Well,
broadcast,
so Dan, the past two postcasts have been East Coast start times. They're 5:00 games, and so I come in and I start my postcast at 9:00. So frankly, I haven't looked at the numbers for who's watched YouTube after this. So if we end up on a tangent about this, I'm all ears. Especially like I mentioned to Andrew. In part because we had some down issue fours like broadcast in the arena on the Jumbotron and the crowd booed. Yeah. Like if that's not like an obvious a foreshadowing of what we're about to experience about Donovan Mitchell possibly getting, I mean, he's not going to get the Gordon Hayward boo every time he touches the ball treatment, which I was there for that game and that fucking rocked. But like if the crowd does not give like this raucous applause, I'm gonna feel really weird about it. So if we want to tangent about it, it's totally fine. I brought you on right as we were talking about it. By all means, we should continue as we have more thoughts and more people here to hear it.
I mean, I think I'm at a place where I'd rather talk about the capital B basketball part of it than have another 4 days of people in my mentions telling me that I'm manufacturing. But I mean, it's such an important conversation to have, and I don't want to neglect it, and I certainly don't want to neglect it on the grounds that, like, oh well, he didn't play that hard at the end of his Jazz tenure, which, first of all, bull crap, like bull crap. Okay, full stop. That's bull crap. That's not the reason that iteration didn't work out. There are a lot of reasons. The fact that Zach Lowe was telling us, a year ago, ooh, guys, I don't know, I'm hearing things, and the end of this iteration of the Jazz might be nigh, tells me that, like, the death warrant might have already been signed while the patient was still kicking a little on that, in the team sense on that. So number one, I'm not going to, lay everything that happened at just Donovan's feet. I do agree with sentiments that, like, our friend Laird and other people have said, which, like, there's probably no one person who shoulders more of that than Don, for a number of reasons, and there were some complicated dynamics that go well beyond the well-documented Don Rudy stuff. There was just the way that Tim McMahon has reported about this, that the team got a little bit too built around Don, and I don't think that was Don doing that. But again, my bigger point here is that even if Don did all that stuff, even if Don is, the worst teammate in the NBA, which he's not, by the way, but even if he was just a jerk behind closed doors, for a person to stand up and say, hey, Utah, here was what was uncomfortable about my time there, our first instinct should just be to, like, listen and consider that and figure out why we keep hearing that. Because, again, he's not the first person to say that, as opposed to going, well, you should have won this many basketball games, and instead you won that many basketball games, so I'm not going to listen to that. Like, frickin' Efe Udoh came to Utah and invited Utahns into this conversation about race dynamics and how we can improve. And we didn't say, we didn't tell Efe Udoh, like, oh, I'm sorry, you average like 7 minutes per game. You don't play basketball at a level that you're like. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He could be the worst basketball player on the planet, and I would still go, we keep hearing this. I think we gotta, like, spend a few minutes on some introspection here, and if we don't, it's just because we're freaking afraid of what we're going to find in that process.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of it. I think to conclude the conversation and bring it back to Capital B basketball, because we got some shit to talk about, brother. The only thing that I mentioned over the past couple of days that I don't think got the quote unquote engagement that I was hoping for, because I didn't see anyone disagreeing with me or agreeing with me to bring this point home, and I'm happy to have it challenged or supported, is I felt like Donovan, as a man at a job, and especially as a high profile athlete playing for a major sports team, he took on this burden, which he should have, and I'm glad I'm glad he did as addressing race dynamics in Utah, and he was a star player of a basketball team, trying to do his best to dealing with the team dynamics that they were. I felt like, as a star basketball player, a young mid-20s star basketball player can take on the stress of the race dynamics in Utah, or they can take on the stress of all the shit that was happening with this basketball team over the past 3 years, and dealing with both at the same time is just like, yeah, you put all that together. I would want to just not work there anymore. I would want to be happy about being in Cleveland, where, sure, Cleveland sucks ass, and I'm allowed to say that because I'm from Buffalo, and I've been to Cleveland a lot, and both Buffalo and Cleveland suck. But and unlike Buffalo, Cleveland is not experiencing a city revival. They're still stuck in Ohio misery because they're in Ohio. It makes sense that you kind of look around, you see Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, and you're like, all right, this is kind of fun and new. Like, and I have no problem with a guy who experienced both those stressors to say that was a lot.
Well, and I guess that's the right place to land, right? Is that is that wherever he landed there as a human. And I don't know why it's so hard for people to, when a person makes a determination that like, this is no longer a joyful situation for me. I would prefer to be in a different situation that's more joyful. You want, like, elephant in the room here, like Bogey by the end of last season was pretty miserable. I heard that Bogey, like, at locker cleanout was basically like, hey guys, I'll see you when I see you, but I kind of hope I don't see you. And those are my words, not his, but I mean, that was the sentiment, right? So a lot of guys.
And quick tangent. There's a reason the Olynyk trade happened so aggressively and quickly. Like if Bogey started the season on the Jazz, we're not getting Detroit Bogey, by the way. We're getting upset and pissed off Bogey, and that's just not. You just don't want to have relationships in the NBA like that, however they exist.
I mean, he's a pro, but yeah, he did not want to come back. A lot of guys ended last year's team saying like, that was a joyless year of my career. I want something different going forward, whether that means, you trade me or the climate is, like I think Mike is breathing fresh air now because his situation is different, even though he's not the guy who literally had to pick up and move. So I just don't know. I just don't know why we, when Bogey arrives at that point emotionally where he just says like, I will be happier in another situation, that we go, good for Bogey. When Rudy does it, we say good for Rudy. When Don does it, we just instantly vilify him. And again, like the basketball piece is nuanced, and like I don't know that December 22nd is the right night to like get into the spill the tea or what. Not that I have tea to spill. I'm just saying like I don't necessarily want to go play by play on like what I heard and whatever. I have been open about the fact that when the off season started, I'm on the record. You can go find my post still. I don't delete posts, right? So you can find my post from early June where I say I think the Jazz can and should consider a reconstruction where they keep Don and Rudy and change enough around those guys that they make it work. And that was my opinion on June 1st or whatever. You and
me both. And when Quinn left, I became even stronger in that approach. I was like, you can change a culture overnight by just having a different voice in the room. And it's so funny to just hear, like, can you imagine just like Will Hardy sitting in Donovan Mitchell's vacation home or wherever he is in Connecticut or Long Island or wherever it was when Donovan Mitchell heard the Rudy Gobert news, and Will Hardy talking with Donovan Mitchell about the upcoming season. Like, we know Will Hardy enough at this point to say, like, that's probably a positive conversation, right? Like, when Quinn left, I felt even more emboldened that keeping Don and Rudy together, or at least keeping one of the two, was a plausible path forward.
I thought so on June, whatever day I wrote that article, obviously, or I wouldn't have written that article. The more I heard as June went along, and then obviously the Rudy trade happened, and then I heard more over the summer. And when I say heard, by the way, like a lot of these are like third-hand conversations, so you have to decide how much of it you're taking at face value. But I just kept hearing the same themes, and from different kind of sides or sources, or this guy's connected to someone in the players' circle, and this guy's connected to someone in management circle, and yet they're all saying kind of the same thing or things that rhyme. And I just got to a point pretty quickly where I started to believe the people who were telling me that, like, no, man, this was just untenable. It had just run its course.
It's kind of like when you're playing blackjack and you keep drawing 2s and 3s, and all of a sudden you got 21. It's like, oh, so this really is all bad. This is bad from all sides, and we should probably we should probably just deal the next hand.
So like I got there. I don't think it was any one person's fault. I think that the cultural compromises they made with Don in mind played a part of it, but I don't think Don asked for most of that. I think most of that was just done because people thought it's what Donovan would want. And I do think that it got out of hand in a way that impacted the culture and impacted the locker room, and that was part of everybody's exasperation. But again, that doesn't make me remember any less fondly the 50 night in the bubble, right? It doesn't make me
to that point, I'm calling a challenge on you and everyone else who's listening. And I'm assuming most everyone here is a pro Don person. I feel like it's only the knuckle draggers that you meet on the street who are anti-Donovan. Like, it's very rare that I meet somebody on the World Wide Web and the information superhighway that is anti-Donovan, or even or even if they're kind of middle of the road on Don, they would actively boo him. I'm calling everyone here that the week before Donovan visits Utah, we should do our best to share all our favorite YouTube clips, memories, box score ridiculousness, funny moments, good Donovan stuff. Let's try to spread the word about what we think about Donovan Mitchell, the basketball player, and the Utah. This is a guy who played for the Utah Jazz, everybody. Like, the Utah Jazz are not exactly... you can't look at the Jazz like the Bulls or the Lakers. They're the Utah Jazz, and we love our team. And we had a superstar playing for us with the signature shoe and gave it his all. Had 50 burgers, had amazing playoff moments, tried his ass off on one leg. The Clippers' loss was not his fault. Right, like and I think we should all do our best to promote Donovan Mitchell before his visit. So, look, man, he's clearly going to get some boos. Like, tonight, preface that. I would like there to be way more cheers to make those boos irrelevant.
And bottom line, like, all that stuff you just said is cool and sounds great on the back of a basketball card. Here's the real way I would articulate it to people. He made your life better. Yes, even you, the knuckle dragger that Mark just mentioned. Like, he made it better. He made our fan experience better. I was proud. Like, that was fun. That was a fun 5 years. Less so at the end, because then the weight of expectations gets there and all that stuff, and we, we'll be post-morteming that particular team. And when I say that, I mean like after they got Conley, Bogey, and Clarkson within a few months of each other in 2019. That's the version that was good enough to do something special. They got to where they were probably an ankle turn away from having a shot. And then they just got sick of each other and it didn't happen. But up until that point, man, that was a fun 5 years. That's what I'll be cheering for. Not literally cheering. Weirdly enough, I'll be in the arena for the Don return game. I won't be cheering, though, because I'll be media for that game. The Spanish radio guys need my help for that week. So I get to be there and experience whatever happens firsthand, but I don't get to cheer or boo because you don't do that on press row. But, man, I'm with you. I hope that it's 85% cheers and not, 60% cheers. People should really be I hate to use the word thankful because then it gets into this whole meta. Like, we should be excited about what they gave us as individuals.
Dan, if you're ever interested, I will give you 9 hours on the meta of being a fan, and I will. For everyone who joined... Go ahead.
We'll still be talking about this at 6 a.m., won't we? I
Yeah.
have a feeling this is going to be a hard one to just, put a button on. But go ahead.
Look. We talked from Don when you were bringing in, and we got some folks on the line. We're here. We're having a great time tonight. I got a 13.1% beer, chocolate churro stout from Massachusetts. I keep forgetting where this brewery is. It's in Massachusetts. But we had an actual win today before Christmas. I called tonight our Christmas game. If you're on Twitter Spaces, I'm wearing an ugly Jazz sweater and a Santa hat, a blue Santa hat for the University of Buffalo, which is my proud alma mater. I'm sorry I'm not a Utah or BYU or Utah State or Weber State or any of those other schools. I am a University of Buffalo graduate. And we had a win today, and I talked about the stat lines and went over some advanced stats. By the way, one stat, Dan, before I ask you about your thoughts on today's game that just blew me away, and other than the 2 screenshots I posted on my effusive Twitter account, Dan, without looking, how many offensive rebounds did Utah give up today?
I don't know the number, but I had looked up the cleaning the glass.
Okay.
Before I jumped on.
3.
So I know,
3. 3 offensive rebounds
really,
today.
Really good in that category.
That the league average is 11 for the season. That is by far and away Utah's best mark on the season. This is a team that does not defensive rebound very well. The Wizards are without Porzingis today, but they have some good defensive rebounders on the court. Beal is a great rebounder. I almost thought that Beal was the team leading rebounder for defense, but it was Rui with 7 defensive rebounds in 23. But no offensive rebounds besides Kuzma, Gafford, and Beal all had 1 offensive rebound. So when you look at the players who played today, Wizards aren't a terrible rebounding team. I'll have to look at I'll quickly open the cleaning the glass stats to take a look at how the rebounding was. But 3 offensive rebounds is a great number.
I'm there, so I'll tell you the Wizards' offensive rebound percentage, so the percentage of reboundable misses that they grabbed on offense, was in the 0th percentile.
Yeah, no, I wanted to see what they are for the season.
Oh yeah. That I don't have up.
Yeah, that's. I'm gonna look up their. Go ahead.
It was clearly a focus. I did see a couple of your screen grabs around. Guess who got this? Guess who got this rebound? When the 5 closest guys to the basketball are all Jazzmen, and then the ball went somewhere else. But luckily, that was the exception, not the rule tonight. I thought that was big. I thought, honestly, this was a big night for the floater range for the Jazz, a range that has been a little bit of a bugaboo this year. You've mentioned at a few different junctures that shot has abandoned Conley to a great degree. Sexton is not as good in that range as he maybe thinks he is. Jordan Clarkson obviously can get out of a straitjacket whenever he's got a foot in the paint and 3 guys on him. Somehow he waits until someone takes a breath, and then
it's sometimes shooting frequency and shooting accuracy is you can't really take much from that game to game, except when you have really extreme numbers today. And today the Jazz did not shoot very many shots at the rim at all, and shot a ton of shots at floater range. And so so you're looking at okay, they're not attacking the rim. They're kind of settling for these little floaters. Okay, what do they do with them? And they shot 47% from floater range, which is okay.
Yeah. And that's I guess, my thing is, especially with this year's team where it's less about the game-to-game results. But even before that, I just try to be the type of fan where my macro opinion about the team or any player, I try not to change it by more than 3% based on the outcome of any game. But I think this notion of the Jazz are so committed to the 3 this year, partially because of the talent they have, and it's still a guard-heavy roster, even though they got Olynyk, who even he is kind of a more perimeter-oriented big. The Jazz are very much into this 3-point identity, and it's cool and it's fun, and it's led to some really interesting games, and I love their style of play. But at some point, I do think that to be whatever serious means, to be a more, I don't know if they're playing for the playoffs by March or April, but if they are, at some point they have to start figuring out how to get some attempts at the rim. And tonight was just kind of one of those games that, like I say, I try not to let a single game change my mind about anything, but it did sort of reinforce something I've been watching and worrying about.
And that's what I keep poking on the Lowry Markkanen front. I love how many points Lowry Markkanen is scoring. I'm surprised by his defense this year. I've enjoyed, obviously, watching him catch fire from 3. And I've enjoyed just watching him kind of continue his Finland-level fuck you attitude with some things. But there are, gaping holes. Not just he's not so good at that. He's got some real holes in his offensive game, and every time I talk about his rim finishing or his rim verve, everyone says, do you remember when he dunked over Rudy Gobert? And I'm like, yes, I remember when, a 20-something mega athlete dunked over him, but scoring at the rim for Lowry is not so much about, a nuclear single possession, but about how can you finish when you got one guy trailing you, because that dunk was it was wide. He had the entire runway to plan what he was going to do, and at the very worst, he was going to get fouled, right? And we've watched Rudy Gobert. His bread and butter is not like, okay, someone is coming at me 148,000 miles an hour and he's going to dunk on me. Rudy's defensive skill was way different than that. And so when you talk about scoring at the rim, it's he and Jared Vanderbilt that I'm like, there needs to be some improvement at the skills at finishing among contact that I want to see. At least Lowry's pretty okay at drawing fouls. That gets me excited. But I'm not sold on him being a first banana offensively yet, in part because of the rim attempts. I have no conclusion. Respond, please.
Well, here's where I'll agree and here's where I'll disagree. So, number one, you're right. Like, if you absolutely yam on a guy on a play where you caught the ball, dribbled 0 times, and dunked on a guy, then, like, good for you for finishing the dunk. But in that scenario, someone else probably made that dunk happen for you, right? And I don't remember specifically who passed the ball to him on that Rudy jam, but
it was honestly a defensive breakdown. It was like Lowry Marketing got the ball, and he was like, "Oh, okay." Nobody was guarding him.
So to me, that's the bigger question with Lowry is like, it's not can he finish here, can he finish there. It's kind of that question of, and I remember watching the same thing with Gordon Hayward in like 2014, 2015, 2016, and then he finally started to get there. It's like, what proportion of his shots are the kind that he went and created for himself? And like, you know, play type stats kind of suck, but they're a decent proxy for this because they do measure the end of the play. So if you go look and you see that most of a guy's opportunities are still coming in, you know, the categories like off screen or cutting or that kind of thing, that means that like you did good things, you moved off the ball, you did all that, but then someone else said, "Here you go, Gordon Hayward, like take this shot." And what started to happen for Gordon in, you know, 16, 17, you know, into his all-star season is that, you know, you started to see more of his opportunities, including misses, by the way, because like sometimes you have to miss these shots before you can make them, right? You just started to see his shot diet, his possession diet gravitate more to the other play types like isolation, pick and roll ball handler. And I think that's the thing I'm watching more for Lowry is like, you know, what was cool about his performance in Detroit, and again, Detroit sucks, so who knows how much we can take from this. But what was cool about Detroit is there were, I think, a higher proportion of possessions where it's like, okay, I've got the ball now. I'm going to go make something happen. I think that's the area his game needs to grow before anyone can consider him like the number one option on a title team. I also don't know that anyone's necessarily asking him to be that anytime in the near future. I think if the Jazz contend in the next 3 or 4 years, Lowry will probably be a part of that contender, but he probably won't be the 35% usage guy on that contender. Maybe, you know, like I hate putting ceilings on guys who are 25 years old, but like that's how I sort of envision it is he can be a really good, you know, Klay Thompson, for example. Klay Thompson is like, he's a freaking all NBA level player. Klay Thompson's going to be in the Hall. And if you go look at his possessional mix, like he's still, most of his offense, even in his all NBA seasons, came on those play types where like, oh, cool, you ran off 4 off-ball screens and then Steph passed you the ball and you shot it.
Yeah, and just I want to carry that forward because I think you're hitting something that is kind of a meta point here. And Klay Thompson is a lot like Rudy Gobert in the sense where like if you were to design a player and you just maxed out their attributes like 100 to like the maximum possible degree in some things and gave them a 0 in other things, right? We've actually seen Klay Thompson dribble quite a bit and like he can be a little bit of initiator and he's actually had some good dunks in the past, but like that's Rudy is also going to the Hall, right? With some zeroed out attributes. And that's where I'm looking from Lowry Markkanen at 25 is like do you have things that are zeros or are they more like, you know, like 12 out of like C minus things? Are they D plus things or are they B minus things? Like you can actually do a little bit of something. And the only reason I'm kind of poking at that is to say, all right, I agree that everyone is thrilled with Lauri Markkanen, and in the front office they're obviously thrilled, and as you say, they're probably not looking at him like Holly Rowe does and saying like, oh, he's like Kevin Durant out there. No, he's not Kevin. Like, no, Holly, I love you, but like he's not like Kevin Durant out there just because he's tall. But to the point of like, is he a max contract second banana, right? Where it's like, okay, and this is the Gordon Hayward issue, right? Is like, do you give that like solid max commitment to your second banana before you have your first banana?
I mean, I guess it depends on if you have a pathway to get a first banana, right? And it's what's hard for the Jazz right now is, because they have enjoyed all this early success, they're not going to be in quite the same position they could have been in draft asset wise, and that's okay, because as you've said all along, like, if you accidentally win 43 games in a season, it means that like, oh, we're more talented. Our base is better than we thought our base was. So I don't know. I sort of poo-poo all of these fans who come to me with their idea that there's like one construction that can win it. Like during the Rudy years, it was like, oh, well, you can't win if your highest paid player is this. And I sort of like, I just dismiss most of those arguments out of hand, because I think in the history of anything that's ever been done, there was a point in time when it hadn't been done yet. And, there were people in the late 80s saying that Michael Jordan would never win anything meaningful, because at that point in time, it was unfathomable that a volume scoring shooting guard could be the best player on a title team. It had, like, literally, go look, like, it had never happened before that a player like Michael Jordan had taken a team to the mountains. So everyone was like, no, that can't happen. And then, a team with a tiny point guard can't do it. And then teams told the Pistons and to a lesser degree the late era Spurs, who, people think about, like, that team had multiple Hall of Famers, but it was after Tim Duncan was a top 5 player, and it was before Kawhi Leonard was a top 5 player. So, like, they were a starless team in that sense, in the same vein as Detroit, and teams, and people said that they couldn't do it because you need X number of superstars. So all of these sort of prerequisites that, like, you can't win this way, you can't win with this construction, that's all true until it's not anymore. I do still, like, that's not me disagreeing with you. I still think that the Jazz would be hard pressed to give Lowry $40 million and then say, okay, how are we finding the guy? But luckily they have some time before they have to worry about whether Lowry's next contract is 40 or 30, because he's under contract for a few more seasons, and maybe some of that will work itself out one way or another.
No, and to be clear, your point about roster construction is right. Like, there's no way to look at any championship contending roster and say, like, well, that's the way they did it and that's the way we should do it. Like, we have a trillion fucking draft picks. There's going to be a lot of different ways to use those, either to draft those players or to trade those picks for players. There's going to be a lot of different ways that Utah's going to try to get back into contention here. The max contract second banana question is not about should we give Lauri Markkanen on this path we're seeing from him a max contract, and is that wise or not? It's merely a proxy to the question of what is Markkanen? Yeah, what is Lauri Markkanen?
Can I tell you what Markkanen is since the last 3 weeks? He's 44 of 77 from 3. It's 58%. 8 attempts per game. That is preposterous.
Yeah, like if you get a 45% 3-point shooter, right? Like if you get a 43% 3-point shooter who that's an A+ skill now, right? And then you're doing like micro dissection of like, okay, how are you shooting those threes? Right now he's already has a healthy diet of isolation or not isolation, but like self-created 3-point shots, right? Where like he gets a bunch of threes off of curls and stuff, but he's also very willing to just like shoot a three in somebody's face when he has other options available, like in the triple threat, right? He's just like, all right, I'll just shoot. And
do not know how many of those are off the bounce, but it feels like quite a bit more than it was early on in the season. And it's not like he's,
a lot
high
more.
volume
You're right.
shots.
You are right.
He's attempting 8 a game. That's not Jared Vanderbilt standing in the corner waiting for his shot. He's he's been crazy impressive.
Yeah, and I will take just a quick moment to say, like, anyone who's in the chat right now, if you want to drop a comment on anything, this is open forum, man. Like, I love everyone here today, and I got a healthy amount of. I'm almost done with this 2 pints of 13% beer. I got a beer fridge behind me that I'm about to crack open. So if anyone on the line right now wants to drop a comment, have a thought about Don, tonight's win, the NBA, your Christmas stress. As Fraser would say, I'm listening. But Dan, continue on the Lowry marketing train if you want to, or talk about literally anything else. It's up to you, brother.
Well, I think first of all, I'd much rather have this conversation after a game than let's talk about the third quarter stretch where I love the macro stuff. So the last thing that I think is important to say about marketing is this. I still think Jazz fans grossly underestimate the amount of turnover we're still going to see. I think it's pretty clear that the Jazz are still thinking about this with a medium to long-term window. And a lot of the guys that we're falling in love with right now just won't be here because their contract situation, their age, their whatever, a lot of these guys are just playing to, are improving their value. Even the ones that are cute stories, or even the ones whose skill sets we think are fun and quirky and would complement a good, most of these guys, the front office is not planning on them necessarily being here in 5 years, and that's okay. Lowry Markkanen is not that guy. I've had people say to me, we hope Lowry Markkanen is still with the Jazz 10 years from now. They are high on Lowry. He was not just salary matching in the Donovan Mitchell trade. He was a target. They wanted him. They would have they would have taken him over more draft picks because he's the type of player who they would have bet on, and he's the type of player they would have turned around and used draft picks on. So he's here. He's going to be given opportunities to lead. I think he's still the most likely guy of this group to be starting on the next version of the Jazz team that goes into the second round of the playoffs or beyond.
You know who I think that is? You know who I wish is here? You know who I hope is here in 10 to 15 years?
Who's that?
Walker Kessler.
And he's another guy. He and still even Abaji, the Jazz aren't low on Abaji. He's just not playing right now because he's got to figure out how to play. But Abaji and Kessler, just because of their contractual realities and just how much control the Jazz have over them, those are two guys who front office people will also say, yeah, there's a good chance they're on our roster in 5, 6, 7 years. And then beyond that, you never know.
It's a fraught question, but you talk about Markkanen versus the other the draft pick possibilities. And by the way, to DB and Dalton or Orchid, after I make this comment, I'll invite DB on, and Dalton will have whatever what you have to say. I'm sorry, Dellen. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. If you were to do the 2022 NBA draft right now, right? Would you take the 28th draft pick and another first round draft pick, or Lowry Markkanen at 24 years old on $14 million? Right. So it's like that. You can look at it. You can look at it that densely to say okay, multiple first round draft picks, or 24-year-old small forward, power forward guy growing into his role with a very reasonable contract for 3 years. That's a very reasonable asset play.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to say that before we left the Lowry conversation. They like Malik Beasley too. They like Jared Vanderbilt. If there's a reasonable way to keep those guys, past their current contracts, but a lot of these dudes are here for the here and now. If the Jazz can get something that's a more forward-looking asset for almost, really, I'd say almost anyone outside of Lowry, the 2 first-round rookies, probably Sexton. I think they also got Sexton with the intent of letting him grow. They know they have to refine some things about his game. They know that that'll be a long-term process. And then, obviously, we all know that ownership is high on JC.
Yeah.
And they're talking extension with him. I think those are the 5 guys that, it would take a knock-their-socks-off offer. Everyone else is look, they love what this group is giving them. They're fun. But, at a certain point, Malik Beasley being as good as he is, or Kelly Olynyk giving them as much as he's giving them, actually makes it more likely that he's not on this basketball franchise in March.
Yeah,
and
you're
I don't know how it's going to play out, but those 5 guys are it would take a lot.
Yeah, you're bleeding into a question I wanted you to put a pin in once we circle around to it, is because you mentioned there's some guys we've fallen in love with that won't be on this Jazz roster sooner than later. So why don't you put a pin on that? Well, I want to circle back to that because I've been screaming at people that the people we like they're not long for this Jazz team because they're playing good. I want to give Mr. DB a chance to give his thoughts on whatever he saw tonight about Don, whatever you got. DB, what do you have, and what are your thoughts about tonight? What do you got, brother? Give you a couple minutes, DB. Not minutes, probably seconds. All right, and so we'll go to Mr. Dallin Orchid, or Dallin. You tell me how to pronounce your name, man. I don't want to get it wrong.
DB, it's DB.
I'm sorry.
Say, first time listening to the show, I love it. Big Jazz fan. I don't know how Jazz fans can embrace Rudy and Bojan and then boo Donovan. So first of all, don't boo Donovan. I think I can speak for everybody. When Gordon Hayward went to Boston, that broke our hearts, and Donovan was that rebound, and Donovan brought us back. You can't boo him. I don't care what he did to piss people off. You cannot boo Donovan Mitchell. That's just the first thing. Amazing guy, amazing player. Yeah, he sucked his last year, didn't play defense, but you know what? You cannot cheer for Rudy and Bojan and then boo Donovan. It's bullshit.
So
get that out of the way.
Well, I'm glad you like the show. Please keep tuning in, man. We love doing these. I'm about to crack open my 5th or 6th beer tonight. I'm not working tomorrow, man. It's Christmas weekend. This is a Woods Boss Brewing Company from Colorado. Winter warmer ale with orange peel, vanilla, cinnamon, and cloves. This is something like an 8 or 9%er. But DB, what is your favorite Donovan Mitchell moment?
Oh man, I'm gonna say the dunk contest.
Hey, that's
what
a good one.
Watching. It's when he threw the ball off the backboard, grabbed it with one hand, and windmilled it down like Spider-Man. I don't know if you guys have seen that footage. Incredible, All-Star Weekend. Donovan Mitchell, Utah Jazz jersey. He made Utah, and he made the Jazz kind of cool.
Yeah,
and, the Jazz get made fun of all the time, and he made them cool.
Yeah, I think that's a surprisingly rare answer, and considering that Donovan Mitchell in the dunk contest is still my desktop background, just
it's incredible. If you've seen that with Spider, the web, and he grabs the ball and throws it back down, it's incredible. Utah's never been cool. No matter how cool or good the Jazz were with Stockton Malone, we weren't really cool, and we weren't hip, and we weren't popular. Donovan really brought that to the Jazz, and to boo him, I think, is just insane. I'm praying for all Jazz fans. Do not boo this man.
Yeah, and the dunk contest is interesting just because Donovan hadn't really figured out what Utah was yet, right? And what he was going to be for the Jazz, and it's probably it is the first major superstar player to play for the Jazz that didn't have the the slant of Karl Malone, right, or John Stockton. And so he comes in, he's like, oh, I'm a rookie. I got drafted by the Jazz. Like, that's a team. I'll play for them, right? And he does such amazing things. I'm not even sure he himself appreciated the impact, the cultural impact that he had on bringing the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz. I've been made fun of my whole life as a Utah Jazz fan. I'm not from Utah, so it's like wherever I went, I was just like, you're a fucking Utah Jazz fan. And his rookie year, I would go around, I'm a Utah Jazz fan. They're like, they're looking cool. And that's the first time in my entire life I ever heard that, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I say. I'm like, please, Utah Jazz fans, this man should be loved as much as you loved Rudy. I know a lot of people don't like to hear this. Rudy Gobert was great man, great person. But Rudy Gobert was always a role player. I'm sorry. He just is. A guy who can't dribble, can't shoot, can't score on his own, and relies on everybody else. That's a role player. Donovan, you need guys like Donovan if you want to win a championship. Guys who can get their own bucket. I'm sorry. When he comes back, I hope there's no boos. I hope everybody stands up and cheers for this guy. He's been amazing. I can't say enough about him. I know he didn't leave on the best term, and he's.
Oh, I'm sorry, DB. I accidentally muted you. If you want to unmute yourself.
Oh, that's
sorry,
okay.
buddy.
When he comes back, I just hope he gets all the love in the world.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Well, DB, I hope you're in the crowd then. I hope you add a voice to that. And Rudy, like, you touch a flashpoint with Rudy, right? Like, oh, was he an actual great player, or was he a role player? And I fall in like this, as always, I'm going to be here with several beers in my mouth to say, like, I'm going to take a nuanced approach to this, right? It's possible to be a game-changing, generational Hall of Fame player that is absolutely an all-star, but because of having certain attributes of his performance maxed out to the moon and certain attributes of his play down to the core of the earth to like a negative degree, it becomes this player that you have to build around in way. It makes management's job more difficult, and it is easier to build around a player that has a more diverse scoring skill set like Donovan Mitchell. So to the idea of Rudy being a role player, I'm not sure I'm going to like co-sign that.
Think about it. Dennis Rodman was a role player.
And a Hall of Famer,
was
right?
A role player. Rudy Gobert is the same type of player. You
right.
need a guy like that, but you can't hand him the ball and say, go win us the game. You need Michael Jordan. You need Kobe Bryant. You need Steph Curry. You need somebody to go win the game. Rudy Gobert is much like Dennis Rodman, Ben Wallace. You need a guy like him, but he's not the guy. It's okay.
Yeah.
Guys like him.
There's... DB, I hope you tune into a future broadcast because I feel like you and I could have the world's longest discussion on Rudy. I'm thrilled you joined us today. Dropped a comment. We're on YouTube if you want to see my ugly. I'm in an ugly sweater, by the way, today, in a Santa hat, and so if you want to tune in YouTube or Twitter next time, I'm thrilled you joined and dropped a comment. I want to give Dolan a chance to. Give his comments on what you got. So please tell me if I'm saying your name wrong, brother.
Yeah, Dallin, or good.
Dallin, thank you.
I've been called worse, so it's all good. I guess a couple things I wanted to touch on. I mainly wanted to talk about what you guys were going to pin to the top of Dan's profile or timeline there, but favorite Donovan Mitchell moment would probably be his playoff matchup against OKC when he's going toe-to-toe with Paul George and Russ and that team, and then mouthing off to that fan as he's going off saying, you did this. That was probably my favorite Donovan Mitchell moment. But he's a very talented player, and the only thing I worry about him is him being more of a Russell Westbrook and Allen Iverson type, just an undersized guard, that he has immense talent and can do, and not to knock on him or anything, because he's a very good player. And also to the Rudy Gobert point, he affects the game so much on the defensive side of the ball that, yeah, I don't need to argue that point. But I guess what I wanted to get to was mainly a lot of Jazz fans, and I speak for probably more of them than not, is halfway through the season, this team's kind of a big question mark of, are we playing to win to get to the playoffs and maybe a first round win, or are we playing to tank or improve our draft position? And so, do you guys see us making a trade to improve our stance to make a deeper playoff run, or just stand pat and just see where the chips fall? Yeah.
Well, so what if it's neither? What are your thoughts on neither?
And just standing pat.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
And then just waiting till the off season to see where the value of all those things are. I mean, yeah, I'm okay with that. It just leaves a question mark for the whole season.
No, I know. I think like the obvious temporal guy is probably Kelly Olynyk, but it's very possible that all these guys like Mike Conley, who's under contract for next year, Jordan Clarkson, who has a player option for next year but will probably accept it, or decline it and take this extension. Actually, no, he probably won't accept it. He'll probably decline it and take a free agent contract elsewhere. But like he's got this player option that will have to be dealt with. Sorry, too much on Jordan Clarkson's contract situation. But I'm looking at this team, and it's possible Malik Beasley has a team option, right? So I'm not seeing a ton of guys who are like, because of their contract status, like their expiring contract status, or like those guys are absolutely off the team. And given Danny Ainge's desire to extract value for guys and is willing to just not do shit if the value's not there, this brings us back to like Dan's comment earlier about what players have we fallen in love with that might not be here, right? All of the guys on the Jazz, part of the reason they're so attractive is that they're not expiring contracts, right? So I'm wondering, Dolan, your thoughts. Dallin, sorry, I keep fucking it up. Your thoughts on like, okay, so if the Jazz don't do anything at the trade deadline, are you kind of upset about a 43-win team that hasn't made a deal at the deadline better or worse?
Yeah, I am, because we've acquired all these assets and we're not maximizing whether it's going to be a better draft pick, or if we're going all in on winning, then let's just go all in on winning, I guess. And to build around Lowry, I agree Lowry's a great talent, and that he's unique. A 7-footer that can shoot threes like he does is amazing.
So Dan, you're on the line if you are. How about you tackle the question of that you didn't particularly answer, which is, what Jazz players have we fallen in love with that might be gone by February?
Well, I don't know, because it takes two to tango, and you know, it's always a function of what is out there offer wise for those people. Like they're not in a rush to get rid of anybody, except me. I hate to crap on Rudy Gay more on this podcast, but you know, like they would give Rudy away, I think, pretty readily. But you know, outside of that, I don't think they're in a hurry to move anyone. So it's just a function of like, you know, will someone want Kelly Olynyk bad enough to offer X? Will someone want Malik Beasley shooting enough to offer Y? And I think they have a threshold in mind for each of those guys. You know, to me, I think about it the other way around. Which guys are probably not going anywhere no matter what? And this doesn't mean they're untouchable. Like, you know, look, if the Bucks, if if the Bucks got drunk and called up and offered Giannis for Lauri Markkanen, the Jazz would do that deal. Like, let's not be ridiculous. But
well, I'll pause you on the ridiculous train on Lowry just for a minute. For the first month of the season, you will catch me on these recordings say that Lauri Markkanen playing as well as he was increases his trade possibility. I don't think that's true anymore, but it indicates the point for all the other role players, though, of like, everyone's playing so good, guys, that like this makes the trade that the Jazz made for Rudy and Donovan Mitchell and the dudes, like the heartbeats that they got back, we might get even more shit for them.
Yeah, that's true. I like to talk about trade trails, right? Like the guy that you traded for that then turns into other things, that then turns into other things, and then like 15 years later, you're like still reaping the rewards of like the Felton Spencer trade in 1995, which turned into Andre Kirilenko, right? So I love that, and that might happen in some of these trades. I never thought that Lauri Markkanen was playing his way to another team, but that's just because I knew all along how excited the Jazz were about getting him in the deal. Like even when I was just talking with people about what theoretical packages from other teams looked like during the summer months, like, here's roughly the outline of what we could get from Washington if Washington were to make an offer. Here's roughly the outline of what a Knicks package is going to look like. And it always broke down in terms of like, here are the premium assets, here are the like, sure, we'll take more picks, and then here's the stuff we don't really care about. Like the Jazz, obviously didn't really care about Stanley Johnson and Saban Lee in those trades. Those guys were in the trades to make the money work. Lowry was someone they always thought of as a premium asset. They thought of getting Lowry the same way that they thought of getting like unprotected picks from the Cavs, because he's a really good player. He was a top 10 pick. He's young. He has a chance to still be a really good player, just like those blue chip draft assets have a chance to be a really good player. So, I think he's always been not untouchable, because let's not be silly, but I think those five guys are the five guys that they don't have to try too hard to imagine, the 2029 Jazz, or what, I mean, that's too far out, but, the 2026 Jazz being really good with, Markkanen and Sexton and Kessler and even Abaji playing a role. So I think that's what's going to guide their thinking more than anything else. And look, like Beasley's 25, right? So Beasley, by definition, he's more likely to be a part of the 2026 Jazz than Kelly Olynyk, who's 31 or 32. That's just the reality. But also, Beasley's playing so well that 29 other teams are going, oh shit, man, we could use Malik Beasley. So that's a situation where I think you might be seeing a guy play so well that eventually the Jazz just might not have
Hey,
choice.
Dan.
Like the offer might be too good. Sorry, go ahead.
Dan, sorry to interrupt. Would you rather have Dylan Brooks or Beasley?
Beasley.
Really?
But yeah, I think Dylan Brooks is actually
Agree, by the way. Agree.
like, I don't think I wouldn't describe Dylan as like fake good. I think he's good at things. I think he's a little overstated as a player.
He's a tough guy.
There's also a big reason why when you start concocting ways that Memphis can go from a pretty good contender to like a holy shit contender. Dylan Brooks is in every last one of those deals. And Memphis loves Dylan Brooks. Like they have this weird affection for him. I get it. Not like the fans, but like the team really does love Dylan Brooks. The problem is with his salary and who he is, it's kind of like, well, we can replace you with somebody who absolutely kicks way more ass than you.
I think we need unhinged players. Jay Crowder, for instance. We need a guy like that. Dylan Brooks, to me, is Jay Crowder with a little bit of potential. You gotta have junkyard dogs. We don't have that.
So, this is always a fun conversation that I love having, especially after I've had the equivalent of like 9 beers. I don't know. I've had a couple of 13%ers, a couple of 7%ers. I don't call them junkyard dogs, DB. I call them fuck you guys. And I think a fuck you guy can occur in many different facets of your roster. They can be your best player. Giannis Antetokounmpo is a fuck you guy. They can be a role player starter like Jay Crowder. He's a fuck you guy. They can be a bench guy that you bring in that he might play a couple NBA Finals games and he might not. I can't immediately think of a fuck you guy like that, but I'm thinking back to like the old Miami Heat Dallas Mavericks series, right? And like the players that played in a couple of those games. JJ Barea was a fuck you guy, right? And
Colin Sexton's a fuck you guy.
so Colin Sexton's a little interesting though, right? Because try hard defense does not necessarily mean like. So he definitely has it like on offense, but these guys that I'm talking about, they're like they bring it defensively as well, and I think that's an interesting point. Is to be a championship contending team, like yeah, you need these guys, and they can occur anywhere on the roster, right? They don't necessarily need to be role players. So I know the statistics on fuck you guys are something that Dan Clayton is very well versed in. But
There needs to be an advanced metric for that. We need to like come up with something and get it on NBA.com.
well,
So,
go ahead, DB. Go ahead, or whoever's request. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I guess get back to the point of if we were gonna go for like a deep run in the playoffs. Let's say the knock off your socks offer comes and Trae Young wants out of Atlanta and we get John Collins, whatever. Just hypothetical. It's dream scenarios. Or Kuzma wants out of Washington and he's telling Will Hardy that he'd love to play in Utah and whispering in his ear. I'm just saying, like, if we get a deal like that, are you guys willing to, or the Jazz, willing to, I guess, part with future draft picks or whatever to get those guys?
Dan, I'll let you take that one, brother.
I guess my thing, like in the macro sense, does Kuzma move you from being a 43-win team to being a 48-win team? Does he move you? Like, I just don't know. For Collins, for one thing, I have a hard time gathering intel on if the Jazz are really interested in Collins or not. I know we've heard things have been reported, and sometimes there are certain people who have a better pulse on what the Jazz actually want than others, and I'd like to see it from like a Tony or a Woj before I really took the John Collins thing to the bank. But I guess my broad answer to the question is I do think that if the Jazz spend any assets at this trade deadline, it will be for someone that is going to help them in 3 years, not someone that's going to help them next week. Maybe they view Kuz or John Collins that way. Again, I don't know. I doubt they view Kuz that way because Kuz's contract is such that like you might just be renting a player for a period of time that you're not going to be that good anyway. John Collins' contract, if I'm working from memory here, I don't have it in front of me. I think his contract is a little longer, so maybe you talk yourself into that, or maybe you back channel with the agents and you find out how that they do have a long-term desire, and that gets you over the finish line on either guy. But again, I don't think they're spending assets to improve this year's record. I think if they spend assets, it's about that 2025, 2026 Jazz team or thereabouts that they hope is in a position to be really good and not just, again, from 42 wins to 47 wins or something like that.
Yeah, so to that end, Collins does have a player option in 25-26. So I think that's why the trade for John Collins has like the tiniest bit of an ember, is like he has a chance of like, do you fit with these Jazz? Like, this is a team. Like, the Jazz are not going to trade for a guy of John Collins' quality who's not a star, but he's kind of very good, obvious starter, who only has a year or two left, right? Obviously, the bogey for Olynyk trade was that kind of a trade, but you save a little bit of money, and it was better than getting a protected first round pick and some bad salary. Whereas like if you're trying to make a trade for a better player than Olynyk, like John Collins, you want to see if there's an age and contract curve that's worth it. So he turned 25 3 months ago. So he's like Markkanen, and like, okay, if you put him in his first ever new situation, is he a guy that could play well with Markkanen and in actual rim protecting center? I wonder if the Jazz have a rim protecting center on their roster that could actually work with them. It's possible. There's I agree with you, Dan. I don't think there's any real smoke on there on the John Collins front. I will say that we got a bunch of requests today, and I want to give everyone a chance to speak, and we're gonna go around the horn. Dan, this is the first time I've gone an hour and a half drinking a bunch of beer, talking about the Jazz, and I got to take a piss. So I'm gonna bring on Kevin Berardi to ask what he wants to do about the Jazz, and do you mind fielding whatever he has to say?
Bring it on. Bring it on.
All right. Kevin, what you got for us, brother?
Kevin, you're on.
Yo, thank you. So I really have appreciated the conversation tonight. It's really some of the things I've kind of been thinking about, and I've been listening to every single one of these Twitter space and podcasts that I possibly can. And an interesting conversation came up a couple weeks back that I kind of want to get your take on. With the Utah Jazz being so successful this season, and I know we've talked a little bit about how things are probably going to change next season. We got 3 picks next season, but we kind of got this gap in 2024 where the only pick we have is our own, potentially, where it's top 10 protected. We owe it to OKC if we fall outside the top 10, and we don't have any additional picks. How does that potentially stall a rebuild if we are too good to not keep that pick and we don't make any moves to get into that 2024 draft? Could some of this posturing to be good be to get us in that draft by creating some value to make moves? I just would be interested to hear your take on that, because when you look at some of the teams that have been successful with building these picks, they've done it over 4 to 5 years, and we're kind of the first team, at least from my research, that has really grabbed picks over a 7-year period, at least from what I can tell. If that makes sense, that question makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And actually, so I think you're right about both the span of time, and then the other thing is, like, you know, OKC has a crap load of picks, right? But what OKC doesn't have as much of as the Jazz are unprotected picks. So those are picks that are guaranteed to convey in those years. And I know that there are people with the Jazz who are proud about not just the absolute number of incoming picks, but the fact that so many of them are unencumbered, right? So to your question about, like, does not having 2024, I think the word you used was stall them. I don't think it does, largely because, you know, where the Stepien rule. So for folks who don't know Stepien, it's the rule that you can't not have picks in consecutive future years. So, like, that can stall you. That can put you in a situation, like, frankly, that's the reason why Jazz Wizards wasn't the Donovan Mitchell reunion, because, like, the Wizards could have made a play for Donovan, but they didn't have the draft capital to do so because they had an outgoing debt to New York, strangely enough. And because of that, they could only trade 2 additional future picks with conditions. And the Jazz were just like, I'm sorry, Washington, some of your players interest us, but, you know, we can do better than 2 conditional picks for Donovan freaking Mitchell. So that's where I think a lack of picks stalls you, to use your word, Kevin, is when it is when, like, now you literally can't trade a pick in a given year. But the Jazz have so many extra picks now, and picks that are guaranteed to convey, that they're not going to wind up finding themselves painted into the Stepien corner. If there's a player they want to go get, and that player is going to cost them, like, you know, whatever, like a DeJounte Murray. Murray cost the Hawks 3 firsts, right? If there's a player they want to go get for 3 firsts, they can, without even thinking about it, trade 3 firsts, right? So then it's just a question of which 3 and how protected they want those picks and all that. So where I do think that they feel a little bit of pain about not having a 2024 is I have heard Danny Ainge say that they expect that draft to be a good draft. So maybe that's a pain point. Like maybe they'd like to get in that draft just because there might be some talented players there. But will not having one stall them? I doubt it, because again, they've got plenty of currency in that department. I hope that helps.
No, that's a really good point, and I really do appreciate your insight, because my thought is 2023 and 2024 are supposed to be two of the greatest back-to-back drafts, possibly in NBA history, because 2024 is supposed to be basically two lottery drafts stacked on top of each other. If the 1 year out rule goes away, which it potentially could, so it could be a really stacked draft. You could get lottery picks as deep as 25. So
add the fact that we're going to have a massive cap spike around that time because of the new CBA, and like you can make a gangbusters free agent signing. Look, and a lot of teams will be able to do so. It's not like Utah's going to be uniquely positioned to make a great free agent signing. I mean, when the fuck has Utah ever been in that position? But like to your point, Kevin, like you can make a great pick if like the Jazz are like still like kind of okay and they're or good even or just not the worst in the league. They can have this Markkanen centric good team make a draft pick that could make a surprisingly immediate impact. Maybe not Donovan Mitchell rookie immediate impact, but like, hey, that's our seventh guy and he kicks ass.
I've even seen some people talk about, I mean, and this is just because everybody knows how crazy Danny is. Danny taking advantage of how crazy people are about this 2023 pick or draft, and him trading out of this draft and trading into the 2024 draft.
I love that you're mentioning this, because I think a lot of people are like they have this thought about having 3 picks in the draft, and in Americans' NFL-centric world that we live in, we look at 3 first-round picks and be like, well, we could get the number 2 pick out of that, can't we? And we absolutely cannot. And I love that you bring up the idea of, fuck it, like, let's get out of this draft altogether. Like, let's trade these picks that we have now for limited protected picks from other bad teams, and we line ourselves up for 2024, 2025. Ryan Smith is patient, man. So when it comes to money, right? Ryan Smith, he's got his money, right? The Millers didn't necessarily have their money. The Utah Jazz and everything associated with the Jazz was a significant portion of how the Millers decided that they wanted to make money. Ryan Smith has his money, right? And I don't think Utah fans appreciate that, having that level of an owner. Like, we don't have fuck you money like some of the other owners, but we have I've made it money, which allows them to be a lot more patient when it comes to things like ticket sales, right? And I think the next local TV contract that Ryan Smith is trying to negotiate will help. So I love your idea, Kevin, of saying look, we got these 3 picks. Doesn't mean we have to take a bunch of players who aren't going to be useful.
Well, and we're not going to rebuild this team with the 2023 draft. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, and so this is just my thought process. If we are lucky enough to get a top 6 pick and we get someone crazy that wants a pick and they want to offer 3 picks over the next 3 years, I mean, do we really need that top 6 pick that bad? Because if you look at the history of the league, it's one person isn't going to win you a championship, no matter whether they're Wemby or Scoot. That one person's not going to win you the championship. You need multiple people.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, you can all stay on the line. I'm gonna move it over to some folks who have been requesting to speak for a while. I know our friend, a friend of the program, Woke Humor Man, Plant Based Chad. You have a stat you want to give us, man. So let me approve you here and give us what you want to talk about. You're on the line.
Yo, what up, man? Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up?
Just 2 things. Going back to your talk about Lowry Markkanen, I totally agree with you. I don't see him being the number one guy on a title team. But I think he absolutely has it to be like the number two guy, right? Like a Klay Thompson-esque type player. And I think, I hear a lot of people are kind of constantly talking about getting stuck in this basketball purgatory, right? And what does that mean? It's like all these teams build this team where you have all the solid pieces. You have a solid 2 through 7 championship team, but now you're too good to get the draft pick to get the number one guy. And if you're not a free agent destination like Utah isn't, then there's simply no other way to get the number one guy. What I see Danny doing is building the foundation, right? Building the 2 through 7 team of a championship team, and then waiting for the opportunity to go buy the number one guy, right? Like Cleveland is not a destination either, and they got Donovan Mitchell. And how did they get Donovan Mitchell? Because they had a good team in place, and they paid out the ass for him. And we're in position to do that, right? And so everybody's like, I don't see them going, like, I really don't see them wanting to spend draft capital this year unless it's maybe 1 or 2 picks, but like they're waiting for that right moment to build that winning team that just needs that number one guy to come in. And I think that, the reason that kind of we traded Donovan so early in his contract is that's just become the way of the NBA now. Like stars are subtly and sometimes not subtly pushing their way out of places they don't want to be much earlier in contracts than they ever did before. And so it's only a matter of time before one of those, all NBA players on another team wants out over the next 1 or 2 years, and we're going to be in the best position to go after them. And as long as we have put together, because you can't just have a number one guy, right? You have to have 2 through 7 guy, and you have to have the one guy. And the trick is always trying to get both of those at the same time. And we're in such a good position. Like we have all, as you talked about patience, right? Like there's no reason to jump at anything right now. Time is on our side. I think that a lot of people, underestimate, like that Cavs team right now looks so good, right? So those picks down the road on the Cavs team, they don't look like they're going to be that good. But how often do teams stay together? Like you look at like the dynasties, like the Lakers and the Warriors, like those are the exceptions, right? Like a lot of other teams you see, especially in these small markets, they peak and then guys get egos or, one guy gets poached from somewhere else and they fall apart and they all go in a different direction, right?
Let me talk to you about the. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to poke you about the timeline, right?
Okay.
Because you're talking a lot about timeline, and I think it is right for Utah right now. So the Warriors dynasty is finally like on its decline. They got their title last year. They kicked a whole lot of ass last year, but all the young guys that they have. It's not screaming like second dynasty, right? Like Steph Curry he can't be Tom Brady, right? It's not the NFL, right? Like eventually they're going to come down to earth. The Bucks look amazing. I think we're going to have Giannis, a Giannis-led team fighting for a title every year. But I think we've seen like even Giannis's limitations have said like you put him with Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday. When Chris Middleton was healthy, they won a title, but that came like they had a fight for that, right? And like it was a 6-game final series, and without Chris Middleton, they just really kind of struggled against Boston, who is the other team that is coming through with like 2 great future Hall of Fame players, but they're running into their own issues. And Memphis isn't really there. Like there's always going to be good teams in the NBA, like great teams, but the Warriors are finally gone, right? With like everything they had going on, and the cap spike lead them into Kevin Durant. And I just mentioned the cap spike. Maybe 2025 leads into something else, where we have a different cap spike that benefits the Bucks or the Celtics or something like that. It's okay to win 42 games and have all these extra draft picks. Where you run into problems is where you have all your own draft picks, no extra draft picks, and by the way, you're almost at the luxury tax. Right? And so, yes, the Jazz are almost at the luxury tax this year, not like right up against the top of it, but they're over the cap this year. but they have all these extra draft picks and players that, like, expensive players that will get them draft capital if they traded them right now. Like, Malik Beasley makes a shitload of money. Not $30 million of money, but if you trade Malik Beasley right now, you're getting something. Maybe not a first, but you're getting some. You have net positive asset players moving forward, and that's just good to have. I mentioned this, the stat that I thought you were going to bring up. Are you going to bring up the marketing stat, or am I?
Yeah, it's funny because I heard you talking about how, we were talking about his threes and we were talking about how he struggles to finish at the rim, but I had seen that tweet earlier from, Andy Bailey that said he had like a 66.8 true shooting percentage for the whole year. So
yeah,
it's like whatever he's doing it efficiently.
Yeah, let me give you the top 10 before we bring in Courtney to talk about how Ryan Smith is going to bring her to a Jazz game. So in true shooting percentage for the year, right? So this is combined shooting from the field, free throw shooting, and adding additional weight to three-point shooting because of the more points you get from a three-point shot more than a two-point shot. I'm really good at math. Number one, Nick Claxton. This is a stat that favors big men, by the way. We're so used to Rudy Gobert leading the stat for years in a row. Number one this year is Nick Claxton at 70.4 true shooting percentage. Then Nikola Jokic, who we know is a great player. Rudy Gobert, Domantas Sabonis, and Grant Williams he's playing great in the paint this year. Austin Reeves, who is completely crushing it from three in limited minutes for the Boston Celtics. I'm getting down there. I promise I'll get there. Brandon Clark, who lives on dunks. Kevin Durant, who is a top 4 player of all time. Aaron Gordon, who is living at the rim. And Kelly Olynyk and Lauri Markkanen. So they make up 10 and 11 on the true shooting percentage leaderboards. Steph Curry is 12. So it's not an end-all be-all, right? Like Austin Reeves is sitting there at 7th or whatever. But Lauri Markkanen... So true shooting matters way more as your usage goes up. And Lauri Markkanen, while we have said, like, okay, he's a dependent threat, like, he needs some other players to help set him up the ball, he's still finishing possessions. And he's finishing possessions at a 66.8% true shooting percentage, which would currently be 11th in the NBA. 10th is Kelly Olynyk, but Kelly Olynyk, as we all know, is shooting like 55% from three right now. So that might go down. Streeter, I do see you on the line, but we did have Ryan Smith quote tweet Courtney, who is worried about Donovan Mitchell's reception with the Jazz when she brings her kids to the game. And I want to know what Courtney thinks about bringing her kids to a game on the dime of one Ryan Smith. Courtney, if you're on, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you're feeling right now.
I was really tired until I saw that tweet. And now, now I'm not going to be able to go to bed. I don't even know what to say. I'm in shock. I wish my kids were awake so I could go tell them. So I kind of feel like alone with this excitement.
Well, welcome to Twitter Spaces with a bunch of dudes who can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Well, my idea is don't tell them. Just tell them like, oh, I got us tickets to the Cleveland game. That they're kind of nosebleeds, but just to be in the building will be cool. And then just like show up and walk in and shake hands with Brian Smith and blow their minds.
If you follow her story at all, she did the same thing with Disneyland. So I don't know if she got it. So.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Courtney.
Oh, you're fine. My husband doesn't watch the Jazz like I do, but he's at work, and I called him. I was like, you have to get this day off work. This is a game you have to go to. So, yeah, I'm just really excited. And I admit, like, there's things that Donovan has done that have bothered me on, like, a personal level. But, you know, as far as, like, him playing for the Jazz, I will always really appreciate the excitement he brought to the community. And for, like, my kids, he's like, you know, they're Karl Malone. So that's why my kids fell in love with the Jazz is Donovan Mitchell. So super cool. I'm just so excited. My younger one doesn't watch as much basketball, but, like, all he knows is Donovan Mitchell. So he's always like, where's Donovan Mitchell? Which team is he on? Why is he not with the Jazz anymore? So I'm excited for him to get to see him because he hasn't gone to as many games. So just Ryan's a good guy, and he's done a lot of good things for a lot of people on Jazz Twitter. So crazy.
I think it is interesting that Donovan, when they asked him, like, what do you miss most about Utah or whatever the question prompt was, he says, I miss giving out scholarships for every win. Right? And I wonder if they stopped that promotion this year because, like, everyone looked around and was like, oh, I don't know if we're going to win, like, more than 20 games this year, guys. And it'd be kind of embarrassing to, like, oh, we'll give a college scholarship, but, there won't be that many. And so I do think that Ryan Smith is, like, one of those folks who, in Utah who's, like, has his ears and eyes, like, wide open to, like, what his upbringing was versus what so someone like Donovan Mitchell comes in, plays for the Jazz, voices his experiences, and Ryan Smith also has, like, the ear of Mike Conley and Dwayne Wade, and I think Ryan's eyes and ears are wide open. So I think that's just, like, a fabulous person that sees your comment on Twitter, which, for anyone on the line who doesn't know, Courtney voiced a thought that, like, her boys, as she just mentioned, like, worship Donovan Mitchell to, like, the way we did, and a little bit nervous, as we described earlier at the top of this postcast, to say, like, what is the reception going to be like for Donovan? Like, they just booed his fucking shoe in the arena, and, like, does Courtney want to expose her kids to that? And I think it's just really cool that regardless of what actually happens, Courtney, I think that Ryan's going to make it a great experience for her kids to enjoy Donovan.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, a couple people commented on, like, I don't know, me overprotecting my kids kind of thing. But for me, it's more like, they have such positive memories of Donovan. And is it necessary for me, if everyone's going to be booing him, for them to be like, why are people doing that? So for me, it's just kind of like, should I leave them with what they had? But yeah, it's great for them. So
it's so funny how, like, I'm a dad of two, right? And they're much younger than your kiddos. Got a third boy coming, by the way, this summer. So we'll see how the postcasts look next year.
What?
I'm expecting my house not to be intact for many years. We're done after this, by the way. So my oldest is named Donovan, right? Like, my oldest son, his name is Donovan, and he was born while Donovan was shooting. I'm being literal about this. He was born while Donovan was shooting, like, 2 of 16 against Houston in the rookie season, and in that series after Oklahoma City. I have, like, size 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, like, Don issue 2s ready for him to wear. I have only good, fun family experiences with Donovan Mitchell. And I wonder, Courtney, give me a sense from you're in Utah, you go to games a lot. Can you give me a sense of how many fans will boo just because Donovan is, like, not with the Jazz anymore and probably gave the vibe that he wanted to leave? Like, Rudy has always said, I want to be with the Jazz forever. And Donovan's obviously never said that. And, like, how much of it is just like, oh, it's his first game back with the Jazz. You're not with the Jazz, I'm going to boo. Like, how much of it is that versus the bullshit we read this week?
I thought there would be some before all this stuff this last week. Maybe not a lot, but I thought there would be some. And then after this past week, I'm like, oh no, that might have changed things for some people. But I don't know. I hope people that go to the game go because they want to watch him play, not going because they want to boo him. And even, like, the only person I felt like was worth booing was Gordon Hayward, and I never booed Gordon Hayward, and I kind of always was like, gosh, every time he touches the ball, people boo him. Like, that takes so much energy to do that every single time. But yeah, I thought there would be some people who, because I think Donovan did for sure check out, and, there's things that he said that I don't completely believe. So I think people picked up on that before his interview, but I don't know. Hopefully it's not as much as I think it's going to be.
So before you joined, I gave a call to everyone that said, if you're as pro Donovan as we are, and I think most people here are, you should share and try to disseminate as much social media stuff as possible to say, like, here's a great moment of Donovan Mitchell history. Like, retweet the Donovan Mitchell game winner against a team that you remember from being in the stands. I'd like to try to drown out the boos as much as possible because, look, the knuckle draggers who will boo him will not realize this. But if you remember Donovan Mitchell getting booed on his first time back to Utah, do you know how bad that's going to be for Utah's future prospects as a franchise, acquiring free agents, etc.? How draft picks are going to feel getting drafted by Utah, right? Is like, if I make no missteps or even the slightest misstep, that I'm going to be treated like shit if I decide that, like, hey, I want to do something else when I'm 26. Like, so that's my challenge, Courtney, is like, before you go, what you absolutely have to accept. Try to join the crowd in disseminating the good vibes.
I will do that, yes. And if anything, like I said, there's things that have bothered me personally, but like as a fan, like,
do you want me to ask you about those or not? Like, so that's the third time you've said that, and like, do you want me to ask you about them, or are you just saying like, sometimes he's not my vibe? You don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
I think he's a good PR person, and I think he's good at saying what he wants people to believe. I think the drama of last year was not, made super obvious last year how bad it was. And then, as things have come out this year, you're like, oh my gosh, it really was that bad. So I just, like, I don't know. Some of the stuff he says, I don't totally believe with it, like his relationship with Rudy and all that kind of stuff that in the JJ Redick interview where he's like saying he wanted to stay with him, and I just don't believe that. But I've always really enjoyed watching him, and I fell back in love with the Jazz. I kind of hadn't watched for a little bit until his rookie season, and so I'm really glad and happy for what he's done for the community, and I'm glad that he spoke out on issues that need to be brought to people's attention. And I think it's important also for my kids to know that he's brought those things to people's attention. So I think it's going to be a good experience.
Yeah, and when he comes back, and regardless of his reception, and I don't know if Ryan Smith is going to do this for you or whatever, but because that was the genesis of your tweet, let's say Donovan gets booed and whatever, and like we're looking at this being like, this is really shitty, and Courtney's poor kids are going to get traumatized. I hope, Ryan obviously has like a very solid relationship with Donovan, and that's probably why he traded him, right? Is to say like, look, Donovan, I know this isn't what you want. Like, let me get you to a place you want to be, whether it be New York, which is obviously what Donovan would prefer, or hey, we're going to give you to Cleveland where you're going to be excited about this. I'm beating around the bush to say, like, regardless of how the actual game and the pregame goes, I hope Ryan does you, and especially your children, right, to say, hey, I know a guy that I think your children would love to meet, and gives them a lasting impression of Donovan that you'll love. And before you respond to that, I do want to mention that, like, it does still bring tears to my eyes, even after 9 beers, to like Donovan's last season in Utah. When they came to Denver, I brought my precocious 2-year-old to the game. We sat front row, and we made a sign like, my son's name is Donovan, and we said this is Donovan's first Jazz game, and the Jazz on the road in Denver, they were blowing out Denver, and every single Jazz player, like, just kind of like ignored our presence in the front row, right? And all of a sudden at the end of the game, like Donovan Mitchell wanted to meet my kid, right? And there are some portions of Donovan's PR attitude or his disingenuity that like we can point to. I point to that moment as when I kind of struggle with analyzing his personality, because he is tired. He just got done blowing out Nikola Jokic, and he's saying like, yeah, I'll meet a 2-year-old like immediately post-COVID to say like hello, right? Like that's genuine shit. Like no one does that for PR stuff. There's other shit he did for PR, but that stuff felt genuine to me, and maybe I'm biased on that, Courtney.
Oh no, and I don't think Donovan's like a genuine person in general. I just think, there's like before this interview when he said, oh, this isn't, a knock at the guys back in Utah. Like when you throw that sentence in there, it's kind of like, well, it is. And then the interview after, you're like, okay, yeah, it kind of was, but you understand it. But, there's just some of those things have irked me, but it hasn't necessarily changed how I view his time here. Some of it makes me sad, for sure, reading some of that stuff, because obviously you would hope that he had a better experience when he was here and didn't have to deal with all the stuff that he had to deal with. So that, bums me out.
Yeah, and I think I think you're getting to something that, believe it or not, in 2 hours we haven't really touched on. I think there actually is going to be a significant portion of fans that just like they feel like it's not quite an inferiority complex, right, Courtney? It's not like, oh, Utah, like we're just so small and unmighty. No, like we recognize that we had the best record in the NBA. We recognize that we put together a great basketball team, and when we had a great basketball team, we were on national TV a lot. Maybe not Lakers a lot, but people cared about the Jazz, and a lot of it was because of Donovan's star power that DB mentioned earlier, like the dunk contest and everything. But it really does suck to hear, as a non-Lakers, non-Bulls, non-New York franchise, that a player just didn't fucking love us. Right? Like they didn't fall in love with us, and I think Jazz fans are particularly perversed by this attitude, given that John Stockton and Karl Malone, like their attitudes and their politics totally aligned with Utah. And it feels like a player rejecting us is that much, and Donovan didn't reject. Donovan has never rejected Utah. Donovan has said that Utah was difficult at times. And just that mild little needling has sent Utah in general into a tailspin. And I think that's the part of it, is like we just don't feel, it has nothing to do with the racial justice stuff. It just feels like a star athlete saying, Utah, not my vibe. Well, fuck you, buddy.
Yeah, and I think some of that comes from, when people have spent, their time and their money, and they feel like, well, I have given so much to the Jazz, and I've done all this cheering for Donovan. How could he possibly not feel that from everybody here? Yeah. But that's just people not understanding and not being able to understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think to also for Donovan, he could have definitely poured it on us in Cleveland if he wanted to, and he didn't. And I think that speaks volumes. Like, he came, and granted, he did tell his teammates, don't take this game very seriously. And so that's, to me, like, Donovan's not out there to stick one to Utah in that sense. And I think when the fans, I think it's going to be 50-50 with cheers and boos, but when they see the highlight video of him in the Jazz uniform performing all those, and they're like, oh shit, yeah, he did do all those great things with us. Yeah. Like, yeah, maybe we should boo him.
Yeah, it is a good point in like the timing of all of this, right? because we do want it to be a positive experience. So the kicks cam, where the Don issue 4s got booed resoundingly by the home crowd, like that comes in a very dead point in the game, right? Whereas in the announcements of the opponent team, where Donovan Mitchell will be announced just like anybody else, and say like Donovan Mitchell, number 45 out of Louisville, right? It'll be that's going to be one thing. And there's going to be a lot of mulling about. So many fans are not going to be at their seats, as everybody knows. And that's not just a Utah thing, by the way. Nobody is in their seats at the time of player announcements or the Star Spangled Banner or anything. But when that highlight video gets played, I bet you that a bunch of people on the fence about like, I'm gonna slip in a boo, right? They're gonna watch those highlights and they're gonna be like, that was a pretty good time, right?
I hope so. And my oldest son's first playoff game was Game 2 versus Memphis when Donovan came back.
Wonderful.
And it was just amazing experience for him, for me, like, out of this world excitement. So I hope people remember all of those moments, because I know a lot of those people who want to boo him enjoyed all of those moments when they were happening. So,
I think it's important to remember that Donovan Mitchell is a young man, that he's in his early to mid 20s. I'm in my early 40s, and I actually had the opportunity to go to college with a young man that a lot of you guys know named Darren Williams at the University of Illinois. We played pickup ball together. Knew him pretty well, and I actually had a chance to share a conversation with him a couple years back, and we talked. And one of the things he said is how he regretted a lot of the things that he said and did when he left Utah because of his immaturity as a young man. And if he had the grown experiences that he does now as a grown man, he might have said and done things differently. And I think we just need to give Donovan the benefit of the doubt, because he is a young man who's influenced by a lot of different people. His agents, his publicists, his friends, his family, who all are pulling him different directions, trying to tell him how to live his life and how to market it himself and how to do what's best for him to maximize his dollars and to give him the best possible image so that he can make the most money to provide the best possible life for him and his family. So I think that's all Donovan's trying to do. I just think he's confused. He's young. So I always give him the benefit of the doubt. I think deep down he's a good guy, and he's got a good heart, and he loves Utah. I just think he's young and confused.
Yeah, and to your point about the point of like where maturity stops and where maturity begins, the way he approached social justice issues in Utah was very mature, right? Like there's no. I know that the audience for this broadcast is very pro on the social justice side of things, right? And the black experience in Utah. So I don't really need to speak too much about that. But even if you had, like, inexplicably were on the other side of hoping that black people were treated equally as other people in this country, you could look at Donovan Mitchell's advocacy and say, like, he went to political leaders. He went to, and he led discussions, and he wasn't sitting there like throwing rocks at police officers, right? Right? Like, it's not like you can look at Donovan Mitchell and say like, oh, what an immature asshole. Right? He was saying like, this is a cause I believe in, and I'm going to approach it like an American should, right? And going past that, I think where you talk about the emotional immaturity and marrying it up with Darren Williams, I think both Darren Williams and Donovan Mitchell, I think you maybe half intentionally bring up a great point of how they're similar, right? And that is, and I mentioned this about an hour ago, which is there's two different kinds of off-court stuff for an NBA player. There's off-court stuff with your players and your team and your coaches, and there's off-court stuff that has nothing to do with your team, right? And if we want to talk about the social justice initiatives as like completely divorced from the team, which it's kind of hard to have it, but let's say it's something separate, and everything with the team, his immaturity and some of the stuff that is totally in range for a 24-year-old multi-hundred millionaire to experience, or expected to be, 9-digit worth person to have, is the way he alienated his teammates with intentionally or unintentionally trying to control the team, right? And that is, I think, what Courtney was alluding to, is like, oh, things he said, things he didn't say, whatever. And that's where, will he look back on it in 10 years and be like, Rudy sucked as a teammate. I didn't like Rudy, but I did not handle my role as a team leader very well, right? Where I did not approach my relationship with my coach very well. I wonder if Quinn Snyder, even in his alleged maturity as a 50-something NBA coach, will look back on this Utah Jazz season and say, like, I had a Rudy Gobert and a Donovan Mitchell, and it was my job as a head coach to get those guys to not get along and be friends, but understand each other a little bit better. And I wasn't able to do that. And down to your point, is the emotional maturity of Donovan Mitchell, I don't think came with the social justice issues and the way they brought it up. But boy, those three words, man, after you've had nine beers, is hard to marry those together. But he approached those so maturely, right, as one could. And in that bubble season, when the Bucks decided that they were going to forfeit a game if certain actions were not met after the death of, I'm forgetting the poor individual's name, but there was a death of an individual at the hands of police, and the Bucks said that they weren't going to play it, right? Donovan Mitchell grew up in the NBA as a multimillionaire in that period, right, as a 23, 24-year-old. And I think he approached it very maturely. And I wonder if, to your point, if in 10, 20 years, if he's going to look back on those 5 years with Utah and wonder, we could have won a championship, not because of my ankle issues that gave us the Clippers loss, but if I just was a little bit more mature with my teammates or something, right? And I don't know if, maybe when we have Rudy and Donovan's Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, we'll have those documentaries. But for now, I think we're just going to have to be left waiting. I got a bunch. I'm going to let our friend of the program, Andrew Streeter, back on. I don't know why you got unapproved, but you're back on. But this is open forum now, guys. We're 2 hours in. Like I said, I'm 9 beers deep, and I'm happy to have anyone talk about anything. Courtney, you can stay on if you want. I know you're wide awake from anything. You can, Courtney, I'll give you the first floor if you have any closing comments, or if you want to stay on or whatever.
I'm going to try to get some sleep, but thanks for inviting me to chat, and I love interacting with all of you wonderful people on Jazz Twitter. It makes the games a lot more fun to have all you guys to interact with, so I hope you guys have a great night.
Courtney, enjoy the game.
Thank you.
And everybody, and again, this is now open forum time. I love having you on. I'm also on YouTube. Obviously, your faces won't be on YouTube because you're on audio, but I'm here sitting here in my ugly jazz sweater, my Santa hat, and I invite everyone who's on the line. If you have a comment that you want to drop, please do. If you want to request to speak, please have at it. And Mr. Streeter, you're still on after a couple hours. What's going on, brother?
Hey, man. No, I just had to go for a drive real quick in the middle of the night. Listen, not to bring it back to the current team or anything, but I would like to do that real quick.
Was there basketball played tonight?
There was, and our team won the game. How about that? So this is career high minutes night for Walker Kessler. Obviously, he did really well. And he's been put in the starting role because of injury and stuff. I man, do you think he's going to be a starter by the sooner rather than later? Like even with everybody healthy.
So I think the bigger issue is not Walker Kessler over Kelly Olynyk, but instead is Walker Kessler or Jared Vanderbilt in the starting lineup. And we haven't seen enough sample size of Lauri Markkanen, Kelly Olynyk, and Walker Kessler. And Kelly Olynyk is slow as dirt, and I don't think you can expect Kelly Olynyk to be a little bit more on the verve. As you can put Jared Vanderbilt out there on defense and sort of work your way offensively. But if you have Kelly Olynyk and Walker Kessler out there defensively, that becomes a little bit of an issue because you have Lauri Markkanen and Kelly Olynyk guarding in an increasingly smaller league that I don't think they can handle. So Walker Kessler, I think, is a starter-level rookie, which is my loose way of saying he's not a starter-level player, but if you had him on a bad team, I think he's a good starter. We have to see with how this team shakes out, I think. I think it was a very promising sign that with Kessler's 32 minutes and Vanderbilt's 28 minutes tonight, that you have plenty of overlap between the two. Not a ton of overlap, but it wasn't like a, okay, you're on, you're off kind of a thing. And I do think that with both of them out there, we haven't played the best defenses over the past two games. We had, obviously, the Pistons the other night. We had the Wizards tonight without Kristaps Porzingis, which, regardless of your thoughts about Kristaps Porzingis, does provide like better defense, better offense. So you're playing a limited Wizards team, you're playing a limited Pistons team, and the offense didn't look like complete fucking garbage with Vanderbilt and Kessler out there at the same time. So that's something I'm going to monitor. Like when you start playing like an actually competent defense, like can those two guys coexist on the court together? Kessler's good though, man. Like I don't know what his ceiling is. I think it's pretty low. But he's I maintain that my hope for Walker Kessler is Marcin Gortat. And if you're sitting there being like, Marcin Gortat, that guy sucks. Well, Gortat was a starter-level player for very good like playoff Wizards teams for a long time. I think like it's okay to play 20 minutes a game, guys. Like he was the 25th pick in the draft. It's okay.
Obviously, tale of two halves as far as defense is concerned. They just did not look like they were like anyone. No one looked remotely, interested in defending the Wizards in the first half. But they came back out with a lot more intensity. Kessler was part of that. And I don't feel like, he's had moments, obviously, this season where, like, he's been posterized or, like, he's caught out of step. But I don't feel like he's been markedly played off the floor at any point, which I think is a great sign for a kid that young.
So what I have to look into more as like a film guy is for the past 4 games that I've watched when, or 3 games I should say, when Kelly Olynyk has been out of the lineup, Walker Kessler has had miserable first halves. He's been trusted by his coaching staff to stay in there, and he's had remarkable second halves this entire past 3.5 games. And that just strikes me for 2 reasons. One, he's a rookie. And if you struggle in the first half against Daniel like there was one point where I mentioned this earlier, where he gave up a fuck you dunk to Daniel Gafford when Walker Kessler was in position. And it was a situation where like Walker Kessler's in position and he had played a lot of minutes and maybe he was tired, but it was like if you're in position to at least like make him not dunk like that. And in the first half, and his very, it's funny, man. I've been tracking this only because I noticed these things, but the past 4 games in a row, Walker Kessler, the first time he is attacked at the basket, he is fouled. And I think the 4 games ago, he was coming off the bench, but in any event, anytime a player drove on Walker Kessler, the first time he was challenged at the rim, he fouled. And you would think of these young guys as doing the opposite. Like, early on, they got the energy, they got the length, they got the athleticism. They're there on the spot. And what you notice about Kessler is that when he's tired in the fourth quarter, he's in the right spot, and now he's not fouling. And that is... The guy's going to be playing in the NBA till he's 39, guys. Right? Like, I think Robin Lopez is like a half tier below his ceiling, right? I mean, his ceiling is a little bit higher than that, I guess. His median outlook, I think, is like a half tier above Robin Lopez. And before you think of Robin Lopez as a joke, Robin Lopez was a great defensive center for the Lillard Trailblazers for a long time. So I'm very optimistic on Kessler. I just don't think you're going to get Hall of Fame level quality out of him. So again, open forum. Anyone who wants to talk or who I've approved as requested speakers can respond to my Kessler comments.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And I should say, Kevin, say who you are. Before we, because we got a few people, so I love to know who you are.
No, sorry, Kevin again. I couldn't agree with you more. I actually think he rebounds better later in the game as he gets more tired because he's not jumping at every person that comes into the lane trying to block them, and so he actually keeps his defensive position better. And when he keeps that position better, he's a better rebounder. That's always been my big knock on him is he's so eager to get that block that he gets himself out of position all the time. If he can find that balance that Rudy managed so well, like he just needs to watch Rudy's videos every single night before he goes to bed and how Rudy just knew how to manage his defensive position and still give himself the opportunity to get those blocks without giving up position on the rebound and without giving up position in the defense. I think he could be, a fringe all-star player, but until he can learn that, I think you're right. His ceiling is fairly low.
And a lot of Jazz broadcasts like to mention his field goal percentage, right? And it's like, the dude literally does not do anything other than like dunk and have like dump off layups. I used to challenge the Rudy Gobert slander because Rudy Gobert could catch the ball on the pick and roll around the not the restricted area, but like that little circle before the restricted area, and he could finish with his left or his right hand. He was very, very good at fooling defenders and finishing around the rim in that way. And so that's how Rudy was such a dangerous pick and roll finisher, is that he really did have a good layup package. And we haven't seen anything from Walker Kessler yet as far as like, okay, so if you get the ball at the free throw line or if you're getting the ball in the paint and it's not like right at the rim, what are you going to do, buddy? Are you going to fuck up or are you going to do something good? So we got a lot to learn out of Walker Kessler.
I don't know, man. I have way more memories of Gobert, posting up down low, and I'm just like, oh shit.
And to be clear, I'm not talking about post up streeter, right? Like whenever Rudy had to dribble the basketball, I got scared. But what Rudy was so good at is he would get the ball on the pick and roll, and he would get it at that halfway point between the free throw line and the basket. And without dribbling, he could finish with his left or his right hand equally, depending on where his defender was shading. And he was quick at reacting to that. And that's where his length and his skill and his awareness really led him to such sky-high true shooting percentages. He was a fabulous finisher just in like the pick and roll, just not as how we're thinking of like the Karl Malone, John Stockton pick and roll where, Malone, like we talk about this revered pick and roll. Malone got the ball in the fucking elbow, right? Like that's not we think of that offense today, like that's not the great place to give your big man finisher the basketball, and you would need like a dribble or 2 or 5 out of Karl Malone to get that basket because Karl Malone was such a talented scorer, right? And the assist numbers for Stockton ended up being juiced because of it. Whereas I'm only talking about the difference between Gobert and Kessler is to say like we haven't seen that. Like, okay, you're not directly under the fucking rim, Kessler. Do you have anything else? And I'm waiting to see that.
Totally. I think that he's going to develop those though, because I've already seen some pretty cool finishes from him. But you're right. Like, he has to be in a certain particular position. But I also think there's a lot of value in lob threat Walker Kessler.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and we saw that tonight.
Yeah, and we haven't seen it like consistently all season. I also think like Walker Kessler seems to have a monopoly on the reverse layup or reverse dunk that Rudy Gobert didn't seem to like have. Like Rudy Gobert didn't like use the rim as his offensive helper, as someone that, and you rarely see 7-footers do that, right? And you've seen Walker Kessler like have a big man on all over him, and he just says, well, if I just like go around the rim the other way, that's 2 points for me. And he did miss a reverse layup today, but we've seen so many reverse dunks out of Walker Kessler this year. But on the other side, like another guy who's really good at this is Mason Plumlee. Mason Plumlee is really good at reverse dunks. Like underneath the basket like that, but it is good spatial awareness for Kessler that is like, all right, that guy might give us 12 points a game if we give him 30 minutes a game. So we get a lot to go with him. He was the 25th pick for a reason. He shot like 53s last year. He made like 10 of them. So it is a thing that might be in his wheelhouse. So we'll see.
There's a lot worse players you can turn into than a Mason Plumlee. I know that, like, he's not as heralded, but, like, I had recollections of several games where that dude's kicking our ass in the second unit. And I'm like, really? Plumlee? And I think we're going to probably have a lot of that
with how good he is right now, I think we're hoping for more. We're hoping for a better Robin Lopez. We're hoping for Ivica Zubac with his offensive ability, right? Like we can get there. I mentioned Marcin Gortat, which anchored a very good Washington team. There's
like a Capella from a few years ago.
Yeah, and even Capella, like you watch the Hawks are miserable right now, and Clint Capella is a big part of that. Clint Capella, like he anchors that team so atrociously. And you see a little bit more fluidity when Onyeka Okongwu is in the game, which serves as his backup center right now. He's a 22-year-old who seems like the heir apparent at center. They operate a little bit more athletically. And like Walker Kessler, obviously with his contract status, you'll see him on the Jazz in a couple years. I wouldn't be surprised to see a team like pay too much for Walker Kessler in like a trade. And but like right now, Kessler is very important to the Jazz winning. So we'll see. Like Kessler's an interesting case, man. I just don't want to be on the hook for $25 million for Walker Kessler. Let me put it that way.
That's my question. Say someone like he's a restricted free agent, and someone just like signs an insane offer sheet for like what's the threshold you're comfy matching that? So
NBA restricted free agency is fun, right? And again, I've mentioned it before, but talking NBA team strategy is a great conversation to have after 9-10 beers, whatever I've had today. So you ideally you have figured out what you want to do with a player before you reach restricted free agency, right? Like you've extended the player the season before. He's an obvious max contract guy, or he's an obvious just send him into the ether. Don't even offer him a qualifying offer, and see what happens, right? Like, Udoka Azubuike was a fun thing because it was like, He's going to be a restricted free agent this summer, and I guarantee you that the Jazz are not going to offer him a qualifying offer, right? Because he's not worth it. So you want to reach the point before restricted free agency that you know what you're going to do with a guy. And Walker Kessler, to your point, could be one of those like tough cases where you don't really want to give him a 4-year extension, but you don't really want to see him getting $20 million in restricted free agency. You kind of want him on your team for $12 million. So we'll have to see what happens with him.
Hey, this is Kevin again. I think the nice thing about Kessler is his skill set is one that can easily be replaced with one of our many draft picks in the next 5 or 6 years. So if we can just hold on to him for the next 3 to 4 years, I think, we'll be okay.
Yeah, like you can't play the asset play forever, right? Like you can't play, you can't trade good asset for better asset over and over and over again. But you raise a great point to say, like, look, Kessler can get traded or signed by somebody else, and guess what, guys? We got a second-round draft pick or a draft pick swap that, like, instead of a Walker Kessler, you draft a center that has a little bit more verve to him as a rookie, as a 21-year-old. And that becomes your center that you pair with Lauri Markkanen. Yeah, maybe it's not a Victor Wembanyama, but it could certainly be a very good center, right? Like, we have unprotected picks, guys. Unprotected picks that vest for the Jazz sooner than you think. Like, we're going to look at next year and the next year and be like, you're looking at your watch and you're wondering, well, like, when can we get these picks? It's going to happen sooner than you think. They're all going to come like an avalanche. So you want to make sure that your team is well positioned to do so. So, friends, we've hit the midnight mark. This has been a great conversation. I've had a lot of beer. We've had a lot of fun. So I'll let anyone on the line right now give some last thoughts. And I gotta sign off, man. Like this has been wonderful, but even I got a cap before Christmas. I got to rest up before I get all these kids opening presents. So,
all I gotta say is it feels so good to beat the stupid Wizards. It doesn't matter who we've had on the team the last several years. It feels like the Wizards have just like been an impossible like hill to climb for whatever the hell the reason is.
We saw the graphic on TV today. Bradley Beal averaging over 33 points a game over his past 7 games against Utah. Bradley Beal has absolutely crushed us. I mean, he's the type of player that has crushed the Jazz over the past 6-7 years. Is a not tiny point guard who he can get in the paint whenever he wants, or if he doesn't feel like expending a lot of energy, he's deadly from the mid-range, and Utah doesn't want to defend the mid-range. And he did that again today. He was deadly from mid-range. He didn't shoot a lot of threes. He could just get to the rim, get fouled, and Bradley Beal kicked our ass again. The good news is we kicked our ass in every other facet of the game, including offensive rebounding, which we actually defended the glass very well. Very happy to see that. Okay, if anybody else, one last comment before I sign off tonight.
Mark, I just want to thank you for your time. I had a blast, and look forward to doing it again with you soon.
Kevin, this was awesome. This was a great conversation. I've loved drinking and having fun with you guys. I've hesitated to do this because it's not like my vibe, and I've set up this postcast and the YouTube to be, hey, we just finished a game. What are your thoughts? You're driving home from the arena. Maybe you're sitting at home. Just kind of like you want somebody to talk to about the Jazz. And so I hesitate to say this, but consider giving a like, subscribe, or a follow to what we're doing at Salt City Hoops on YouTube or here on Twitter Spaces. I'm Mark. I love hanging out. I love the Jazz. I love talking about the Jazz. I love beer. I love drinking about beer and talking about the Jazz. So we'll catch you next time. There'll be Monday night. We'll have some more road games. West Coast road trip for the Jazz coming up, and before our next home game on New Year's Eve against the Miami Heat. But this West Coast road trip, man, means West Coast start times, which means you have live Salt City Hoops postcast that I hope you join on Twitter or on YouTube. Friends, it's been a great experience tonight. I hope you all have a happy holidays. Got a stressful Sunday coming up if you got kiddos. Christmas is always fun. So that's it. This has been Salt City Hoops live postcast. Happy to have you, and we'll catch you next time. Good night.